All right, everybody, welcome into the Fifth Dimension podcast. And for today's show, I am joined by Jaime Bennington. Jaime, thank you for taking the time to come on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, such a pleasure. And I think it's almost synchronistic in how it sort of came to be and
Yeah.
Amanda connecting us, but I definitely feel like we resonate on a lot of the same topics, and it'll be a fun.
I'm so excited to find out just how much because
Yeah.
I don't know. I love I loved every title and description for every episode. That sounds weird, but I did read them. I was like, well, I got to know what I'm
Sweet.
doing here. So
Sweet. Well,
um,
I jump
yeah.
all over the map with this show. So,
Okay, good. Because
it's
I
beautiful.
also jump all over the map. It's connected. It's just
Yeah.
far reaching sometimes.
Exactly. It's
Loops
all
back around.
interconnected.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected. Nothing is separate, especially on this show. So I would love to start with your movie. You just released A Chant.
Yeah.
I watched it twice last night. Like, it was
Oh wow, thank
fantastic.
you so much.
It was really good. It was like the first time I felt like almost getting worked up with it. Like, I was really caught in the emotions of it. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God. And then the second time I had more of like that analytical lens. Like, it was
Yeah,
good.
you
It was
could
great.
kind of remove yourself from
Right. Exactly.
the
But
chaos.
it
Yeah.
was really good. I mean, I'd love to start, you just talking about that. What's sort of your inspiration in making the film?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for watching it twice. It seems like we don't have so many like viewers and quantity, but
Mhm.
everybody who watches it two or three times, which is like something I feel like I'd have to usually tell people to do.
Mm.
So the fact that it's facilitating that kind of uh, behavior, I guess, in the audience is so cool without me
Yeah.
having to say anything. So I appreciate you looking at it and also watching it as many times as you did. Um, but yeah, I basically started this whole thing almost 3 years ago now, like about the better half 3 years, like
Mm.
two and a half, 2 3/4. I was listening to Skeleton Crew, the short fiction collection that Stephen put out.
Mm.
And before I read it, well before, but I just happened to read it then. And I listened to a lot of audibles. So it was really cool to listen to that book in particular because it had a cast of really, really good actors, people that I love, like Michael C. Hall and Will Patton and
Right.
Norbert Leo Butz. I think that's how you say his name. It's the craziest name in the world, but he's so cool. He's on Bloodline, I think that's what it's called, on Netflix. So I was listening to it, and it was Michael C. Hall. Or I can't. So there's the Ballad of the Flexible Bullet, which is like a companion piece to this poem,
Yeah.
and it's either Michael C. Hall or Will Patton. I believe it's actually Will Patton. So I misspoke right there, but I might also be wrong still. Who knows? It's probably Will Patton or Michael C. Hall. But when they read it, it was so like visceral, and so there was like a nice little music track underneath. It was super ambient, and then it's about paranoid schizophrenia, which I just recently learned is actually an incorrect way of speaking about schizophrenia now, because the
Uh-huh.
DSM-5, which is like an analytical handbook on mental disorders, they in 2013 they redefined what they used to call subsets of schizophrenia into a spectrum of schizophrenia. So
Mm.
it's a sliding scale, and
Right.
that's actually way more realistic than it just being you're paranoid all the time, or
Right.
you're anxious all the time. It's not one or the other. They kind of blend
Yeah.
into each other sometimes. And I heard it and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then I was thinking about at the time doing as many short films as possible to like build up my directorial credit, but also get some practice and work with people and get to know, to kind of like build a network of people that I knew and
Yeah.
could gel with. And I ended up writing the script and then graduating because I was in college at the time. And in that time, I was just kind of Stephen King was my best friend. And I was, besides like Alex Rhodes, who composed the music for the film. And I was just reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. And then I was like working out. And then I was like grieving for the rest of it because it was my
Yeah.
last semester and my father had just passed. And I just didn't know how to deal with that. I had no sense of what emotional literacy was. Didn't
Mm.
have any idea how to deal with any of that. I wasn't going to therapy. I wasn't motivated really to go to therapy. If it was like, go so I don't have to deal with you. And I was like, I think that's kind of annoying. I don't want to do
Right.
that. And so I started writing it, and then I ended up moving to LA and waited for my friend Matt to get out there, because we were going to do the film industry thing together. And we had done a bunch of short films together on my YouTube, all of our stuff we've done together, and up until A Chant. And basically we went to LA and I wrote this whole thing out, and then I kind of got caught up in like working full time and also doing an internship for free. And then I was like, it fell to the side. And then I was like going crazy because I still wasn't dealing with my grief and my my mental problems. But I had at that point started realizing like, oh shit, like I understand now that I have something to work on, because I realized a lot of things. It's kind of a long story, but at one point, I used to walk around the neighborhood and like panic attacks at night at like 2 a.m. like a crazy person, with my headphones blasting, like the Last Shadow Puppets, just doing this to my hands, just hitting my hands together until I could only feel that pain. It was like a grounding thing. And then I would stop having the panic attack. And then when I did that enough times, I was like, holy shit, I need to think about this in a different way, because that's not okay. I shouldn't be doing that. Just purely from a health standpoint, like that's just not good for you. To be punching your own hands all the time and walking around at full speed for 6 hours a night, that's just not, it's not something I would recommend for anybody. But I realized that then. And so the script kind of became a platform for my experience. And then when we moved to LA, it became even more of a platform for my experience, because LA kind of just chewed me up and spit me out. And I did make it. Matt, not so much. It was one of those things where he's like, I would rather go home and do normal people stuff, because this is horrible and this is hard. And then after that, I was like, well, if he's going and I know that I need to live differently, then maybe I should start working on a film and like putting all of that current experience into something. And that's when I started really paying attention to that script again. And I rewrote, I think at that point, it was like the 6th or 7th draft. And I just was like, okay, well, how can I fund it? Did an Indiegogo, did all that. I had some help from my uncle, Ryan Shuck. And because Julian K does all of their stuff on Indiegogo, which is like pretty impressive. They make a lot of money off Indiegogo. And that takes skill. And that was something we had to work on for a while. And then I was casting and like pulling people in from my school days. Alex, my best friend and roommate for a long time, was a film composer. We were both in the same studio together, trying to achieve that composer track. And then we both didn't make it. And then we both ended up taking the same degree, which I think was probably liquidated after we finished it, because it was really just an amalgamation of like all of the things that music students didn't want to take. And I ended up doing that, becoming like pulling people, becoming kind of like a network monster. I would be like, oh, what do? You want to edit? Okay, come here. Oh, you want to do music? All right, I know you're capable of it. Let's go. Like, oh, you want to set design? Let's go. And I started realizing, like, not only did I have many classes with these people already that I didn't realize I had classes with, but they were all super talented. And so the film was done pro bono. Nobody got paid for anything. We did it over a period of, we shot it over a period of like 6 or 7 months, because we had to shoot 5 days one place and then everybody had to go back to their normal lives. Austin, the lead, who plays Sick, he lives in California, so he had to come out for 5 days and go home. Aaron Ford, who played Sick's brother, had to come in for a day. And so we did a lot of rehearsing, and then I got everybody together and we did these shoots, 3 shoots. We did one in Sedona for 5 days. We did one a month or 2 later in Phoenix for 2 days. And then we did another one a couple weeks after that in San Pedro and Palos Verdes, because that's just like a really cool place to walk around. And California. And then we basically spent a year in post-production, because COVID happened. That was not something we were expecting at all. We were having some like infighting in the production because it was for free. So there was some like headbutting on like who got what credit and who has what control over what. And it was like, whoa. This is a story about mental health, guys. We're trying to like, help people here. We're not really trying to like have a pissing contest about, And you know, and it's not to point any fingers or anything, but it was the first time we'd all done something like that. So it wasn't like a lot of, I called it infighting, but like
Right.
disagreement. It was just a small period of disagreement. And then I shipped it off to our editor, and we went through 4 editors
Wow.
because our well, Michael Bruce, he is a great friend of mine, and we met through a friend, and he ended up doing all the post-production by himself. So
Mm.
like I was there for the editing process. I'm very meticulous that way. I was there for every single second. Everything that we did was so specific down to like the fraction of a second.
Yeah.
And we shot it backwards. We edited it almost backwards. And it was a really difficult process. We didn't have a full sound crew or electric departments. We didn't have lighting departments or anything. So it was whoever could do what. And we basically didn't have sound for half the film, including the dialogue. So we had to
Wow.
figure that out. He was really, really great and optimistic in terms of that. And that was a whole thing. But he got a spinal injury. So he ended up having to get help, and then COVID hit, and then, you know, he couldn't get access to certain things. So he couldn't work as much as he could. And then I gave it to somebody else, and they were like, oh, well, I have 6 jobs and I'll get to it. And I get to it. And then they kind of like went in and like messed it up severely.
Uh-huh.
And then we were like, oh shit, we gotta revert it back to what it was. And then we got another guy on and gave it to him. And then our first editor was just like, I don't want to edit anymore. Like, I just don't want to do
Oh,
it. So it was like too taxing. So it was like one of those things where you're like, oh, that's how Mike ended up getting it. And then Mike ended up taking it again, despite his back issues. He was like, he has a bulged disc and some nerve problems. So he has a degenerative disc disease. And so he couldn't sit down for more than 15 minutes. He couldn't lay down for more than 15 minutes. And it was just, it's brutal, you know? And it's
oh my
like, I felt
God.
so bad, but I was like, we need to get this done. Like it is done. It just needs like minor sound work and some credits.
Right.
So he was like, you know, just picking up the slack of everybody else. And, you know, it's one of those things where like, you can get upset about it, but like realistically, I'm struggling because of the pandemic. All these other people are struggling because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Can I really be upset with them? And so
Right.
the answer was no, but the answer too was like, well, we could have all communicated a little better. Like if that was something you couldn't do, you could have just said you couldn't do it.
Right.
So I learned a lot about communication throughout this entire thing. And then we put it out, and it was, I think it was within a week from the premiere, Mike took up the work again, and it looked like the movie was just totally destroyed. And I
Ooh.
was like, oh my God, what happened? Like, what happened? Like, we can't put this out. This is a reflection of all the people who worked on it. There's no way. And I had already told everybody because I was promised that it would be fine.
Yeah.
And then Mike did some kind of weird voodoo magic and made it all work out perfectly fine. And he's such an angel and one of the coolest people I've ever, I mean, he's like one of those guys that's like endlessly optimistic.
Yeah.
Where you're like freaking out in the corner, like screaming and crying and like, why does everybody hate me? And he's like, no, look, check this out and push a button. And then he pushes a button and it's fine. You're like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Savior.
Savior. Yeah, absolutely. And he's not, you know, the biggest member of the group. Everybody really pulled their weight, but it was like one of those saving grace kind of things where you're like,
Yeah.
all right, I couldn't have done this without this guy at all. Like we would have just had assets sitting around,
Right.
just 100 takes of one scene and nowhere to put them. So that's a brief overview of what the movie was like. And essentially the script was written with a lot of care because I was adapting Stephen King's work, and I did the math. It was like 21 novels and 11 short story compilations. Like I read a lot, you know.
Wow.
I mean, the guy has like 70 books, but that's like somewhere close to 40
Yeah.
that are published I've read. So I'm like, okay, well, I know the author. I want to do a good job in adapting the work, but also I want to make sure that it's a platform for something. I want to make it worth it. Like, if somebody's watching it, what are they getting out of it? And also, I need to talk about my experience with mental health and mental illness. And I've said in a bunch of other moments talking about this, like I didn't realize how much of my struggle I put into that film. And so when I saw the final version and everything was all tight and the music was laid properly and, you know, everything was ready to go, I was like, ooh, Oh man, I was really there. I looked to my partner and I was like, was I really that bad? Like,
Mm,
do you think I was really that bad? And because they met me when I started the process of making the film. So
right.
they've been through a lot with me. A lot has happened in the meantime socially outside the film, and they were like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like you were really that far gone." And I was like, "Oh my god!" Like I thought I wasn't. Like I thought I was doing pretty good. And no, 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 you
Right.
were. It's just that you were going through a lot, and I was like, I didn't even because
Mm,
my life is a lot. So like for me, it's normalized. Like the level of stress I was under all the time. I was
right.
like, well, this is normal, right? But then again, I thought panic attacks every day for 23 years of my life were just things that everybody went through every
Right.
day.
No,
So
I mean, I can relate to that. I mean, when I was having my own mental health struggles, it was sort of like it's I felt sort of alone within it, but at the same
yeah,
time, I didn't think too
yeah.
much about it. It's like, maybe there's something wrong, but at the same time, like you just
Well, I
kind of
mean, why would
continue.
you, right? It's
Right.
like, because I feel like, and I don't want to speak for you, of course, but in my experience, like a lot of the people in my life were going through similar things
Yeah.
and always had been, and they never knew, or they never took the time to figure it out, or
Right.
they just outright were like, I'm not going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so it's a scientific fact that when you're a child, you model the behavior of the people around you. And so I looked at back at my parents, and even after, because I'm undiagnosed BPD. I did all the research. I looked at all these things, and I was like, holy shit, like, wow, I really, this is me. Like, this is me. They're talking
Mhm.
about me. This is so crazy. And I looked into it for a couple of months, and I was like, oh, it's kind of undeniable. And I gave my parents a call, and I was like, hey, like, maybe you should get checked for this. Have you ever been checked for BPD, borderline personality disorder? And they were like, no, I've been checked for bipolar and all these other things. I was like, well, maybe you should check that, because I see a lot of myself in you. And it's not a criticism of you. It's
Right.
just, if you didn't know, now you know. And I can't not share that information with you. So, and of course it was taken negatively, like, oh, well, you're trying to, point things out, or,
Right.
touch a sore spot for the purpose of causing pain. And it's like, well, no, 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 I'm going through it. I know how painful it is, and I know how confusing it can be. So if you are, my parent, and I see these things, I have to tell you so that you can be able to help yourself,
Yeah.
right? And not stumble
Absolutely.
across it, because I stumbled across it. Um, but yeah, like every one of my parents was like definitely dealing with at least one thing where you're
Mhm.
like, it's just chaos and madness all the time, and you're like, well, that's normal. That's
Right.
totally normal. Of course it's normal for my parents to treat me like that, or for me to go through the situation and have a certain response. And like, it's not, though. Like, it shouldn't be. And
It
that's the
shouldn't
thing
be.
you realize is like, oh, okay, well, maybe that needs to change then.
Right. Definitely.
um, but yeah, it's definitely like going through it alone, because even though you see so many people struggling around you, you're like, well, but they're not even aware, they're not awake to the fact that they're struggling. And if they were, at some point they went back to sleep, like immediately, because it's really hard to deal with.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And yeah, so it's just one of those things where you're like, how could that seem normal? Like, now that I know, I'm like, I'll never do that again, like,
Right.
absolutely
Definitely.
not.
And it takes a lot of courage to actually like face what, like when you have that almost waking up point where you realize,
Yeah.
this shouldn't be
Oh,
normal.
it's massively difficult. It's like
Yeah.
the heaviest thing in the world, and like you're like the scrawny kid who's in gym class, and they're like, do 100 pull-ups, and you're like, I can't do 100
I can't
pull-ups. And
do
like, if you don't,
five.
you
What are you
drop the
talking about?
class, and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's, of course, there are like ways you can correlate that to like suicidal ideation, and like dealing with um, just the sheer amount of things that you have to work on and be conscientious of at all times, and the things that you
Yeah.
have to like struggle with. Like, it's like a wrestling match all the time. And
Yeah.
I don't know what your mental health struggles are, but I thought it was depression for a long time, and I found out that it was BPD.
Yeah, I mean, it was never diagnosed by any means, and it
Yeah,
was it
no,
was very interesting because even to this day, I don't think I could give it an exact label because
yeah,
I sort of, I would. There was definitely a lot of social anxiety growing up. Like socially, I
yes,
was almost inept, which nowadays it's interesting because I'm so like different and outgoing and
yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so confident in like just sort of speaking, but was socially inept. There was a lot of anxiety. Once I got to college, there was a sort of a deep level of uh, I want to say it was like a depression, but I don't know if if it would be
yeah,
diagnosed as such. But there was And once I
I know what you're
actually,
talking about.
yeah, and at one point there was uh, the first year after graduating college, I got my teaching degree, and I was working in a mental
Oh wow.
health like classroom, and it was all students who had socio emotional like disabilities. So
Yeah.
there was schizophrenia, there was depression, like
Wow.
severe depression, and I
Was that just
remember
like
it was
a
mind
flip a
blowing.
switch? You're like, whoa, wait, you're me.
Well,
Whoa,
no,
wait, hold on.
exactly. I went in there and
Yeah.
there was I had all these like preconceptions about what I thought schizophrenia would be like, or what I
Yeah,
thought
right?
major depression would look like. And I
Yeah.
was like, I see so much of me like in you, in one of these kids with schizophrenia. I was like,
Yeah, oh,
wow, I've had those struggles.
absolutely.
I've had those
Yeah.
struggles of the kids with depression. And so it was a big
Well,
wake up call.
I used the term schizoid tendencies for the first time
Mm,
because, like, a couple days ago when I was talking about the film, and I don't know if there's a better way to say that. It feels kind of condescending or like patronizing in a certain way, but I don't know another way to say it, so I'm not trying to say it a
yeah.
bad way. I mean it in a good way, like just for what it is. But I didn't realize that I had like schizophrenic tendencies
Yeah.
most of my life, you know?
Yeah.
And so when I made the movie, it was a really big deal to me. Because at the time I was working with 320, which is a nonprofit that my mom runs. I worked with the or the festival, the 320 festival, to do a whole segment on film and mental health and mental illness, and having panels of people there. And it didn't lift off the ground by the time COVID happened. We had to turn everything online, and it's just
Yeah.
a lot of work to transfer everything. But so for me, making sure that I'm being not PC, but scientifically accurate, and not condescending, and not
Yeah.
using the wrong language, it was really, really important. And so we use terms like died by suicide instead of committed suicide,
Right.
which is a whole different mindset, because it even encourages you to think differently about things like depression and people who have schizophrenia or depression or anxiety or any of these things. Um, and so I had the script actually, for as much as my experiences in it, I wanted to make sure that whoever was watching it that maybe didn't know they had something with them that they needed to look at, or maybe they did know but they don't like the way they're portrayed.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure it was as accurate as possible to the definition of schizophrenia. So I went to Dr. Barbara Van Dalen, who is with Given Hour and now is with Prevents, which is the preventative task force, or this task force for suicide prevention in veterans with the White House. I had her specifically read it and give me the green light, because I
Mm,
needed to make sure that she's one of the leaders of the field in
right.
that regard. And I was like, tell me, am I being insensitive? Am I using the wrong language? Is this accurate? And so I got the like authenticated seal on it, which
Right.
was really important to me too. So
Definitely.
but it changed my opinions too, because I had to do a lot of research to like see where certain things lined up. And I imagine it's a similar situation to where like you walking into your class with preconceived notions and
Exactly.
being like, whoa, wait, hold on a second, I deal
This
with at least three of these things. You
right,
know?
exactly. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
shit, my list is a little bit like longer in terms of what like the awakening of what is actually going on within me.
Yeah.
It was a big wake up call. And I think, it's crazy because like traditional like Hollywood and all these other like
Mhm.
the TV and film industry does such a I mean, I think they're getting a little better, but they historically they've done such a
They're
horrible job of
doing such
portraying.
incredible jobs, at least in cable television.
Yeah.
Not necessarily I don't know about broadcast, but like HBO is doing some incredible things right now
HBO's
with
nice. Yeah.
gender identity and mental health. I mean, watch Euphoria, We Are Who We Are, programs of that nature, and it's
Yeah.
like it's a whole different world. It's like they
Mm,
suddenly these things changed, and they were like, well, we have to talk about it. Like now that we know
right.
about it, we can't not. And they're all very like aware, very much awake and intentional,
Mm,
and they're beautiful. They're just things that you watch and you're like, this isn't just some like weird meandering on what transgender is or what schizophrenia is or what drug addiction or toxic stress is. It's like, no, these are real people who deal with
right.
real things, and they're probably actually mirrored off of the people writing the scripts. And that's amazing that these people are getting the chance now to really speak about it and really go on about it. Cause even like, I'm a big fan of Legion. I always bring up Legion on FX, but Noah Hawley tried to do that in a superhero capacity, and he did a phenomenal job on like morality and how these things shift as your growth with it, you know, increases or decreases, in terms of your health and overcoming and coping. But he also had to kind of make it quirky and funny in order for people to really engage with it. And Sam Levinson, who does, I believe that's how you say the last name, he does Euphoria. It's like, he just was able to just throw back the veil. I mean, even Fargo season 4, this last one that came out, incredible. The ending was just phenomenally beautiful. Chris Rock and his whole like the whole gang thing, and how these traumas are passed on from generation to generation, is so powerful and so true. And it's just, I feel like people are trying. They're trying really hard.
Definitely. I would agree with that. And I think maybe in the past there wasn't just that awareness to it.
I mean, Jim Carrey did the number 23, so
yeah.
And Jim Carrey doesn't really do those things. That's the movie I bring up all the time when I'm like talking about spectacle. I never wanted, in the vein of Stephen King, in the spirit of adapting his work, I understand that his use of spectacle is never for the sake of spectacle. It's it's a vehicle for the message beneath it. You know, if you watch the 4 hours of the It movie, the new one, you know, the ending comes down to, you give these feelings power, you give these emotions power, and these emotions do control you because they are alive. And all you have to do is stand up to it. And what do? They literally just yell insults at the clown and it dies. And you're like, that's exactly what it is. And so I was very careful to make sure that none of it was like the number 23, where it's like, oh my God, every 23rd word is some crazy message. And like, oh my God, and I kill myself. And you know, it's like, it's this weird kind of like, in my mind, it's a fun movie, but it lacks the necessary substance. But if you watch something like Kidding or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, or any of these things that Jim Carrey does, Horton Hears a Who, even, like, if you watch any of those other ones, you realize like, oh, that's a weird movie for him to do. The number 23 is a weird choice, because none of it kind of plays the whole thing off as like a sexy joke compared to like, you know, like somebody actually suffering from a failed suicide attempt and dealing with schizophrenia and a lot of guilt based off the things that happened in that state. So I think it's, you know, I think people are starting to realize that it's their, not only their right to tell their stories, but they have all of the control now.
Definitely.
And maybe it was George Floyd. Maybe it was the pandemic and people being locked up for so long. I don't know, but something changed, and I don't know where it happened.
Oh, definitely. And we've seen with like the pandemic, mental health is something that's been like the amount of mental health, like suicides and things have really increased tenfold, because, you know, we don't have our social connections. We don't have, there's certain,
also there's a veil lifted, right? Like when your social connections are probably people that are toxic to you. There are a lot of couples, you know, partners who are like, I can't fucking handle you anymore. I don't want to be here with, and it's like, well, why? It was working fine when you weren't stuck in the same room. So what exactly is the issue now, and how come you can't resolve it? And there's a lot of interesting talk about that, and a lot of interesting experience on my side, because you know, I have my partner, and it's like I deal with my BPD, and they deal with my BPD, and they also have their own things they're going through, you know. And it's interesting to see how things work out in that sense, because I think a lot of people, Amanda, I was talking to her this last week, doing one of these, and we were talking about how, like, you know, people are confused often about what is right for them, and when you're around toxicity all the time, you normalize it. And so she's like, well, people are experiencing, you know, stress and fear and all this stuff. Sorry, Ethan from the movie keeps calling me. I need him to stop. He's called me like 3 times. She was saying that people are going through these things for the first time. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that they're realizing now that they've been always dealing with it, and they don't know how to deal with it, because they always treated it as if it were something that either didn't matter or wasn't there at all. And so there's a lot of like change in the way people are even viewing themselves. you
Right.
know?
No, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of crazy, but isn't that crazy? Like you needed a global pandemic to lock you in your house to realize that you were being lied to and that you need these things to change. Um,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and I honestly, I don't, I was wondering like, cause I kind of believe in synchronicity. I really believe in synchronicity. I also believe in things happening for a reason, for the
Right.
most part.
I do too.
There is some randomness in it, of course, but so there's randomness and synchronicity, and randomness and synchronicity is intentional. So I don't know about that. And when you look at it, it's like I was like, why isn't this movie coming out? Why isn't it finished faster? And I was getting really frustrated with the timeline. And I realize now, like maybe the reason people are watching it 2 or 3 times when they watch it is because they see themselves in it, even if they don't see the schizophrenia. They're
Yeah.
like, that's what it's like. That's what my experience during this entire COVID affair has been like. Because whether you equate the characters in the film to like the conspiracy side of the film to like the GOP or like the
Yeah.
president or something, or you actually consider it to be like paranoia, like I'm being watched and I chemtrails in the sky, or like I'm being poisoned, or I think the mind can overgrow really quickly, and if you're not adept at like trimming the branches and the leaves that aren't necessary, it can really become a problem. And I
Definitely.
think that's what people are resonating with. I don't know for sure.
100%. No, I 100%
Yeah.
resonate with that because it's before really actually taking the time for myself. I would say this pandemic for me has actually been a beautiful silver lining for me to actually
Yeah, I
to
would
connect
agree.
with myself, like to
Yeah.
actually like really establish meditation practice and like be
Oh
consistent
yeah.
with it,
Oh yeah.
to
Me too.
establish
Yeah.
mindfulness and just like uncover deeper parts of myself. And I really resonated with um, the character in the film because I've been in I mean there's certain um, like I didn't, I guess, do all of the actions within it, of course, but like I
Yeah.
resonated with
Yeah.
a lot of the paranoia and like,
Yeah.
I will admit I'm a conspiracy minded person. Like naturally, I
Yeah.
question everything. So like if I'm not careful, I go deep down the rabbit
Yeah.
hole and it turns into something that is just not beneficial. And I actually have to stay mindful of that because I
Yeah.
recognize what that can lead to. So it's I definitely saw so much of myself within the character, and um, it's it was a beautiful portrayal. And I also want to give credit to Stephen King too, because I mean,
Right.
he he portrayed that so beautifully in what is it? The poem is fair, like what 100 lines, I believe. Like,
It's 100 lines. Yeah, I adapted it into a 30-page
yeah,
monster, but yeah, it's yeah, I mean, I basically the thing that Sick is writing all the time is the poem.
yeah,
The things that are being transcribed by the detective are the poem. And
right,
so I just kind of took that material and then went, well, if I was engaging with it and that was my reality, what would that look like?
right,
Um, but like the thing too that's really beautiful about it is like Austin, I had to almost train him in the ways of mental illness,
mm,
like awaken him to it. And because when we originally started working on the film, he was like, we were doing script rehearsals, especially with the brother six scene, where it's like it's really the only dialogue in the film.
yeah,
Um, and I think it speaks volumes to his character and his situation. But it's like we had to figure out how to accurately portray these things, because I would write beat a lot, which is like shorthand for pause or give a breath in the script. And I did excessively use it, and he would always be like, "Well, why are you using it?" And I'd be like, "Because you're not conscious." I was like,
yeah,
"Because when you're going through these things, you're like spacing through them. Like you hit a point of contact, and then you wait, and then you bring it back down to another point of contact, and then you
right,
wait." And so like it's not a literal conversation you're having, and it's like your brain is trying to process the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings, all of this stuff at once, and it's like breaking. It's like when your computer has not enough space to do something,
right,
and it's like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna open the application now," and you're like, "Okay, dude, it's taking like an hour."
yeah,
And that's when you're in a really severe condition, that's exactly how it feels all the time. And for him, he'd be like, "Well, okay, but like, okay, so I get the pausing, but like, why do I have to, like, what is my intention in this scene?" I'm like, "Your intention? What do you mean your intention?" He's like, "Well, I mean, like, well, I'm yelling at my brother. So like, am I angry? Am I sad? Am I like, what's going on? And I'm like, you're nothing. Like you're not really engaging with your feelings. You're reacting to your feelings. So there's a
Mm,
difference in that. And I had to explain to him, like, no, mental illness is not a conscious choice. Like people with schizophrenia who might turn on somebody or might become violent or something, they're not, it's not a choice of, do I want to become violent? Do I want to
right,
hurt this person? Do I want to say these things? It's a matter of just triggering, just like a trigger finger. It's like you have a gun and it's an automatic and you don't know how to stop it, and you just pull
right,
the trigger on accident. It's like, oh, okay, the gun's
right,
everywhere. Okay, oh, hold on a second. You know, it's like you can't expect somebody untrained to handle it any better than that. And so I had to teach him essentially what my experience was and what was going on with me. I didn't realize that at the moment, but I had to teach him like what awareness was and what intention was and how it impacted um, the feelings that come after an episode
right,
or the feelings that happen during an episode. Because when you're in an episode, you're not, I would say you're not even fully aware. You're not aware at all. There's no such thing as awareness.
right,
If you're unaware of the fact that you are sick. So if you don't have like mindful meditation or things like that to balance you out, where you have that really complicated way of coping and kind of holding yourself down, it's not aware at all.
right.
You know, it's not intentional at all. There and that's where people get confused, right? They're like, well, they yelled at me and they said mean things or they were reclusive. They don't want to hang out. It's like, I didn't say that. And
Right.
if I said it in a moment of my episode, it's like manic depression. You don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, oh, I cleaned the house today. Awesome. Tomorrow I'm going to want to kill myself. You know, it's like, it's really that steep. And to
Yeah.
have to explain that to Austin was very enriching to the experience of making the film and to my own experience of myself, you know, looking back on it.
Right.
And it really changed him because we've maintained a relationship. We're friends. We've worked on other things. We have a personal relationship now, not just a working one. And you know, he called me up the other day and he's like, I have questions about meditation. I have questions about all these things.
Mm,
Like, can I just like hang out with you? You want to talk? Like, and I talked to him for 3 hours and I just told him about my philosophy on the universe and my philosophy on meditation and where my things come from and in terms of my trauma and how I deal with them. And because he was just dipping into it and he was like, well, I know somebody who I can talk to.
right.
And
Right.
then 2 days later, he was at my house and he stayed for a weekend and we were just meditating and hanging out for a while, you know, and that's
Beautiful.
cool. Like that's the kind of thing this film was meant to facilitate, right? It's
Right.
like to
That's
have that
beautiful.
conversation, to have those relationships.
Right.
It's really great.
Breaking down the stigmas that may
Break
exist,
it
bringing that
down.
conscious awareness, and
Yeah.
it's like it's really empowering to uh, bring that awareness and recognize yourself within a, you know, a particular character, and recognize
Yeah.
sort of your own struggles, and like just the willingness to make the choice to want to dive into like
Yeah.
meditation or mindfulness. Like it can be so empowering. I mean, it's not something, I guess, you meditate once and you're like, I'm better, like all
Yeah.
done.
No, no, no,
Like,
no. In fact, meditation is a constant struggle. But
right.
that's what
100%.
I mean. I don't think that's a bad thing though,
Right. I
because
agree.
the thing is like you're always going to struggle.
Right.
There's always going to be something you're not going to deal well with. And meditation is a practice of always being willing to deal with it.
Right.
It's not necessarily willing to struggle, it's willing to acknowledge there's something that you need to deal with and then dealing with it in a healthy and constructive way regularly.
Right.
So it's also, as good as it is for you, it's also one of the most difficult practices
I would
to
agree.
do, especially if you have a mental
Yep.
condition, if that's what you want to call it,
Yeah.
um, an untangling to do.
No, definitely. I mean, because it's bringing you into direct awareness with what it is that we don't want to face. And, you know, a lot of our conditioning has been, it tells us to not to repress these things,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
shy
yeah. I was just gonna
away.
say that.
We don't
Yeah,
want to really deal with the things that lurk within the shadows of ourselves. So it's, you know, meditation is that, all right, let's face these
yeah.
things head on. And it's,
Well, dude, meditation shows you how many lies are just dangling in front of you.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I told Austin this too, and I tell everybody I come into contact with who wants to try mindful meditation or wants to try being aware all the time and intentional all the time, because that's something I practice. I rarely do anything that's not intentional or aware,
Mm.
unless it's an episode, which of course I would do my best in the moment to be those things, but it's not always possible. Like I said, I had hit you up right before this and was like, sorry, I'm late. I'm having an episode, because I was freaking out over like
Yeah.
stupid stuff, and it's like I had to like do my
Right.
own thing to bring me back. But with Austin, I always tell him like it's a cycle, it's a secular thing. You will fall back asleep for a brief period of time,
Yeah.
and then you'll come back, but you have to come back. And that's the thing that's really difficult about meditation and awareness and intention, is like it is the heaviest load, because one, nobody else around you is doing it. So if you're the only one doing it, it automatically becomes difficult, because once you realize like the institutions you're participating in, the infrastructure you've been given, and the policies that you're following, all these things are like superfluous and like feeble and like
Yeah.
change all the time, but we like kill people over them, and people go homeless because of them, and they starve, and like, they're discriminated against. All these
Yeah.
things are horrible things,
Yeah.
and it's like, is it easier to stay asleep
Sometimes I
or to
wonder.
stay awake? And for me, for a long time, I used to be really bitter about it, because I used to be like, well, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter who I help. It doesn't matter if I meditate every fucking day, because I'm going to go back to work, the same job I hate with the same boss who hates me. I'm
Mm.
going to go literally just for telling them like, hey, you're working me a little too hard. I can't do all the jobs you're asking me to do because you're not letting me do them. And they're like, cool, well, you're fired. And you're like, oh, all right, well, I'm your best worker. It doesn't matter. All I want is somebody who will conform to me. And I'm like, all
Right.
right, well, then that's not going to happen. Taking those steps is really hard, to like willingly lose a job in order to maintain your
Yeah.
philosophy and your practice. Like, it's a big deal. And that is something that has happened to me. That's not just an example. So it's like, we deal with that all the time over here. We talk about our friends and stuff, and we're like, are they awake still? Are they trying still?
Right.
And I can sympathize. I understand that it's difficult, because it is really grim if you go the wrong way.
Oh, definitely.
If you go the wrong way, you're like, okay, cool, so I'm a murderer. All right.
Right. Right.
Cool, so I eat meat, and that makes me a monster, because of all of these slaughterhouses. Like, I see
Yeah.
the footage and I still participate, or
Yeah.
like I still go to the job that runs people into their graves for the money that I'll never use the way it should be used, because I'm too scared to use it, because I grew up in poverty, and I know what being poor and on the streets like. Like, those are real fears, and those are things that are bred into you from the moment you're born. So it's like, for me, 23 years, and then having to like recondition myself immediately. Luckily, I'm one of those people that's like, cool, so you're just diving in, or we're just gonna go straight through it.
Yeah.
There are a lot more people who are like, okay, so that's there. I'm gonna walk around it for a second.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'll get the stamina or the resistance to do it at one point, but
Maybe dip your
there, but I,
toes in a little, but not
yeah, but it
full.
doesn't work that way ever. It
Right.
never works that way. You can't learn a language by dipping your toes in.
Right.
You
Oh,
can't
exactly.
learn anything dipping your toes in. It's just superficial, and that's actually where the phrase "jack of all trades" comes from, because it's an insult.
Hmm.
Ironically, we're in an age now where it's actually a compliment,
Right.
because it's not a superficial knowledge of all these things. It's not a surface level knowledge. It's people with many different degrees doing many different things at a fully developed pace and fully developed knowledge base, instead of like, yeah, I know how to, I'm a machine mechanic because I can take a tire off a car. It's like, no, I can rebuild the engine, I can fix all the wiring, I can,
Right.
and that's really, really cool, because I feel like that's actually more human than anything else. Is like, we are
Definitely.
multi-tools. That's what we
Oh,
do, right?
yeah.
But when you're beginning this whole thing, it's like really fucking difficult to
Oh, yeah.
realize that that's actually the positive side of it. Is that the more people you touch, the more people that you come into contact with, the more you can spread it.
Exactly.
And maybe not so beautiful of a term, spreading, but you can. It's contagious, right? Like, nobody ever forgets the nice things that were done to them. They might
Right.
remember more of the bad things, but even if you teach kids early on, like, this is the universe and this is your place in it. And it's not a negative thing. Later on, they'll go, wait, hold on. I'm one with all these other things. They'll come back to it. If
Right.
you're with like somebody who deals with a lot as an adult, you know, you're like, hey, I'll buy you dinner. It's cool. Like, crash on my couch, whatever. You see somebody homeless on the street, you help them up. You call the ambulance on them
Mhm.
because they're not awake, they're not like conscious, and you know that makes a difference. Somebody called that ambulance for you. You
Right.
know, somebody paid for that meal, and that will always stick with people. And I find that it actually takes time to change people,
Yeah.
and that's probably the patience is maybe the worst thing about it,
Right.
because it takes years. I mean, 3 years.
Oh yeah.
It took me almost 2 years of knowing Austin before Austin and I had that relationship where it's like, you
Right.
know,
Right. But that
but
that
it's worth it.
oh, definitely. I mean, that
Yeah,
compassion, that kindness, it always
yeah,
does pay forward. And I think, I look at like the state of the world and you talk about, things like homelessness and poverty and
yeah,
all these things that we can get really down about if we choose to. I look at like what when I ask like questions like what are the solutions to these things? I think it is
yeah,
the small empowering choices to be
yeah.
conscious to them.
Because they add up.
Right.
You know, it
Exactly.
stacks. It stacks.
Exactly.
Um,
With
I don't know
yeah.
why I just thought of Apex Legends, the video game.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, if you get, I was about to use the analogy, like, yeah, if you get one 10% boost, and then the next time you get a 10% boost, it's a 20% boost.
Right. No,
You know,
exactly.
yeah, but that's it. That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is.
Right.
That's funny
And if
that popped in my
if
head.
everybody is getting that 10%, then
Yeah.
20% boost, and you have larger communities of people
Well, I mean,
doing
two
that.
people with a 20% boost is a 40% boost.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And then, well, that's 80 if you know,
Yeah.
however many people that is. I don't want to do the math, but
Me neither.
the math is correct. It's just I didn't say what number, so I'm not wrong.
Right. No, exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, I'm not a mathematician, so I'm
Yeah,
not gonna jump in onto the math, but
I'm a philosophizer. Leave me alone.
but yeah, and I think that's how you create such like beautiful change. And I think the like for me, how I said the silver lining of this
Yeah.
pandemic was that self exploration. I think
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
first part of self exploration is a lot of times dark and tumultuous, and you actually have to go through the
It hurts. It's
yeah.
painful.
It's
It's a
like the
painful
it's like
process.
the Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey like
Hmm.
archetype like series, you leave what is normal, what you
Yeah.
perceive to be
But
regular
isn't it
and
cyclical too? You always it goes to the hero and then it drops back down to the new hero, and
yeah,
actually those are cycles of the self as well.
right.
So
Right.
it's not necessarily just Indiana Jones. It's you know it's every stage of life that you go through.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You go through this sort of journey and you face trials, you face tribulations, and I think the first one that you go through, this first awakening that you have, it's going to be like you're going to have to face the shadow. You're going to have to come
yeah,
to terms with whatever sort of whatever has been holding you back in the past. And
yeah.
then once you kill the dragon, it's like, all right, we're onto
Oh, it was
something
a
here.
dragon. Oh, okay, cool. So I can cut its fucking head off. Awesome. You
Exactly.
know, I've done that. I've in my meditations, I'll do like ceremonial killings,
Mm,
like sacrifices.
it's
I'll
empowering.
if I need to, and I find that I have enough holding me down, I'll meditate and I'll have a dialogue with myself, and I will pull to the. I'll be like, you know what, you know what, mom, here are all the things that you planted me with, and I don't like them very much, and it's really just doing me very poorly in comparison to all these other things I need to be doing. So I'm going to remove myself and remove you. And it's not that I'm removing the person, it's as I'm
Yeah.
removing the conditioning that person gave to me in any kind of capacity. And so then I not only change my definition of what it is, I change my relationship to that thing I just defined, and I change my practice of how I cope with it or how I implement that in the rest of my life.
Right.
And it's almost an instantaneous release. It's so crazy how your mind works that way, but you can literally like feel the difference
Yeah.
immediately. You're like, whoa, anxiety just disappeared.
Right.
Wait, so if it's that easy, then how come we're not taught to do it from a young age? Because that's what pisses me off.
Right.
That's where I'm like, well, then who did this on purpose?
Right.
because and that's one of the things that like my meditation has brought me to. It's not a hatred for all things bad. It's not like a super down and depressive view on the world and how horrible it is. It's like I see so much good,
Yeah.
but it's somehow camouflaged by so much bad. And my question is like, my main question is like, what is the source of that? Where does that come from? Is it intentional? Is there like really an Illuminati behind everything, funneling negative energy into things? Sure, why not? I mean, I don't see why not. Buddhist monks can group together and create tulpas with their minds if they focus and chant strongly enough on one subject. Why couldn't you do that through manipulating people through media? Why
Yeah.
couldn't you get 7 million people to watch a show that tells you that you're disgusting for having a mental illness, that you're disgusting for wanting help, that you're disgusting for all these things, and have them watch 6 seasons of it, have them praise it, give it critical acclaim, and then have
Right.
everybody meditate on that? Because I mean, what are you doing when you watch something? Are
Right.
you
You're
you're
you're in
meditating?
like a flow state. You're really,
You're in a flow state. You sit down and you become a part of that environment,
yeah.
and it encodes you with certain things, and um, that's really important to know. Is like, yeah, that could be possible.
Right.
Also, there are lots of things about lights we don't know, like light conditioning, pattern conditioning. You can have certain light patterns. The first time I ever saw it used in a popular context was in The Fringe.
Hmm.
Have you ever watched
No,
that?
I don't think I have.
One of the characters gets amnesia from a sequence of lights, like red, blue lights. And then they were like, well, I was following this person, but I don't know where they went. And you find out that they were, controlled through light. And that stuff is very real. They use it on mice
Right.
to turn off their pain or their tactile senses. They use condition certain colors of lights to target neural pathways. And then the mice just don't feel that thing anymore.
Right.
And so, there are very real things to talk about. And yes, of course, you could slide down the rabbit hole and be like, well, then we're all slaves and everything's
Right.
evil. But also, you can look at it and go, well, that's really cool. So, what can I do with that? Can I
Right.
uncondition people doing that? Can I liberate people doing that? Can I liberate myself now knowing that these things have an effect? Because it's not
Right.
like I'm a sleeper agent. It's not like I've been controlled and with a would you kindly, I'm just going to get up and go shoot a bunch of people or something like that. It's more like suggestions over time. 23
Yeah.
years of suggestions. I watched 7 seasons of Lost. What did I get conditioned with? A lot of great things, I'll tell you that. But
Yeah.
but Damon Lindelof is like one of the most awake people in the industry, so it's not
Mm.
like I need to worry about him.
Right.
Um, I mean, if you saw The Watchmen, I think there's no question.
Right.
But
Right.
it's like one of those things where like I'm looking at it positively and I'm seeing it from a perspective of like, okay, so the way we speak to each other is through art mostly. It's mostly through film. It's mostly through visual art. It's mostly through stories, and there's a reason for that,
Yeah.
which is why I adore the Dune books
Mm.
because they're just that fucking good. Frank Herbert knew all of this stuff that we just talked about,
Right.
and he wrote over a decade worth of books about that and how to uncondition that and the philosophy behind it. I'm on the third one right now, and it's just absolutely beautiful the way that
Mm.
these characters exist in their own philosophies and the way that they show how things are broken
Right.
and then how they go about fixing it. It's not always like, I mean, Paul Mudd is like one of the best characters in the ever created because he's not a negative person. He
Right.
deals with like heavy shit that like would crush anybody else. And he's like, no, there's a positive solution for everything. And
Right.
even when there isn't, he's like, okay, well then I'll accept it and I'll just work through it, whatever. Like I fucked up. Okay, great. I'll move through it. Like
Right.
there's no reason to hate myself for it. I didn't know. Now I know. I'll do better. And there's like something about that kind of thing that is necessary today because we're starting to get back into the art of that, but it's not. I mean, these books were written in 65,
Right.
so it's like one, that guy had the balls to put out these books in a socially conditioned society that almost resorted to capital punishment if you weren't patriotic,
Yeah.
meaning the United States. I won't dance around it. I mean our country.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and he's like Carl Jung, where Carl Jung was like, um, I believe in God, but he
Yeah.
only said that because he didn't want to be burned at the stake. What he meant was, I believe in the God of the self. I believe in self-individuation and working through problems and not being reliant on anything outside of myself, but being totally reliant on myself,
Right.
meaning the components of one's identity, not myself,
Right. No,
which is
definitely.
grammatically and syntactically an odd thing to try to convey through speech.
Right.
But
Well,
yeah.
I was gonna say, if anything, though, I would agree with that, and I think it's empowering to take that on, that persona. And I look at, you know, I'm a very like spiritual being. I look at like
Mhm.
different religions. I look at like the Bible, for example. It's like a lot of stories that represent sort of the archetypes of the self and
Oh
learning
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the idea of God. I
Absolutely.
think it's always just it's just about the God that is it within. And I think, you know, that's
Yeah,
what Carl Jung speaks about. I think that's such a
yeah.
big concept in Buddhism, obviously. And, you know,
It's
it's
it's so crazy because it's true. And the thing is like a lot of what Christianity, and I'm going to harp on Christianity for a second
that's fine.
because it's a bit too militaristic. And I grew
Yes.
up in a Baptist and non-denominational family, so I am allowed to say these things. I
Hmm.
have experience, but they are so militaristic in the sense that they don't support individuation. They don't support self-respect.
Right.
All they support is fear, and it's typically in the mongering capacity. And it's all anxiety, paranoia. You're always looking over your back. You're always scared of something. Anything new is the most despicable thing.
Right.
And that's horrible, right? But the thing that Christians seem to forget is that the Bible, that's being circulated, is actually one of two versions of the Bible. And it's actually heavily manipulated depending on what political and historical context you're looking at, because each Bible comes from a different era. Um, and it was mostly for manifest destiny agenda,
Right.
right? And that's the thing where you're like, they'll be like, yeah, but that's because God said it. We can have every. No, 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 no. That's not what God said. And actually, if you knew your history, if you actually educated yourself, you find out that ancient languages are specifically pictorial. They're specifically symbolic because
Yeah.
people didn't have language. Actually, spoken language as the written word is one of the most limiting languages you can ever have, because
Yeah.
there is a limit,
Yeah.
right? Because what you're writing down is not an idea. What you're writing down is the phonetics for that idea. That's
Right.
different,
Right.
right? You're not showing the idea. That's why I think film and visual art are so interesting, is because they actually surpass that barrier in a very direct way, where they
Right.
actually do show symbols. Words, phonetic arrangements are actually turned into symbols.
Mm.
And I mean, I tried to do that with my film. And I think it works out if you look at it, even from a Jungian perspective. There's red all over the film. If you look at it as a self individuation on either side, you realize how temporary each one of those realities really is, and how many details seem to kind of like throw themselves away at any given second. And you're like, okay, so this is two aspects, the logical and the body, the mind and the body sides of sick trying to reconcile with himself.
Right.
And that's one interpretation on my side. I have many interpretations. I feel like that's when a work does its best, is when you can interpret it 100 different ways.
Oh, definitely.
But with the Bible specifically, you look at it and you go, okay, so 3 days of rest and resurrection, the Revelations book, not to count the 3, 4 to 5 books that were just stripped out of the Bible, despite the fact that the Bible explicitly says, do not remove anything from me, do not subtract or add. It's done religiously,
Right.
ironically, maybe unironically, I'm not really sure. But it's all imagery. It's all symbolism.
Right.
And if you look at it that way, the Bible's actually really cool no matter what political spin you put on it, because guess what? The people who are interpreting it for their political manifest destiny agendas were not looking at it from a symbolic point of view. They were looking at it from a literal point of view. So they're taking it as a history.
Right.
And guess what? A lot of those images, a lot of those symbols still made it in. Most of them did, because they didn't change the fundamental symbol itself. They changed the way it was expressed.
Right.
But if you look at it from that perspective, you're like, wait, Jesus is actually, even if he's not real, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The concept of Jesus is mindfulness and awareness.
Exactly.
Uh, It's love and compassion no matter how difficult it is, and it's the ability to tackle problems with a sense of levity and to accept your shortcomings. It's Paul Madib.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except for Paul's not Jesus Christ, and Paul actually hates the term Jesus Christ. He doesn't like being called a God. In fact, his children, even him and his children, are like, we're going to undeify me because that's not the point of what I did. That's the way people wanted to take it, but I'm not a God. I'm just
Right.
a person. I'm a symbol. That's it. And the symbol should stand for more than that. And so it's really funny when you look at those things, because you're like, but the Bible just preaches the self. The Bible just preaches individuation. It
Yeah.
preaches self-resolution,
Right. It recognizes.
and yet
Yeah.
the church says no. The church
Right.
says don't do
No,
it.
exactly. And that's what
It's
it's
so
sort of
fun.
it's interesting because the like traditional fundamentalist religions have become
Yeah.
exactly what the original teachings preached against.
Oh, yeah. They become they become the shadow.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. In
It's
reality,
there's a kind of beautiful symmetry in it.
yeah,
You know,
it's a good representation
I
of
don't
what
know.
happens if you're not like, mindfully aware of your own like divinity. And that's what religion's
Yeah.
teaching. It's what it should teach. It's the recognition of there is something divine. There is something unique
Mhm.
about every single person, and that should be our focus. Like that should be what we build off
Absolutely.
of as
Yeah.
individually and collectively as a society. I mean,
Yeah.
just imagine if that was our focus. Like
Oh,
it's
we would be spacefaring, and we'd probably be one with the universal consciousness at this point.
oh yeah.
If we had spent all of that time going, yeah, let's focus on the collective consciousness and awareness and our individual awareness, we probably would be able to actually move shit with our minds. I don't
Right.
like, we'd probably be able to teleport just with the thought of teleporting. I mean, all the science also points to the fact that like a lot of the things that we take for medicine in terms of pharmaceutical remedies, they are things our bodies produce on their own if we can train ourselves to the degree where we can convince our bodies to do it on
Right.
their own.
100%. Have you ever heard of have you heard of Wim Hof?
Yes, yeah, that's
Yeah.
so crazy. See, that's one of those things where I'm like, that's so crazy that you said that, because I was just about to talk about yogic breathing. I was
Yep.
just about to talk about him. And
Yeah.
I was just, because I just went on this whole thing where I rewatched a bunch of stuff and I rewatched a bunch of things attached to it. I love TED Talks. I love
Yep.
lectures. I just watched a Royal Institute lecture on the neuroscience of consciousness and
Mm,
how we're predictive creatures, and how that's to our, maybe it's to our benefit most of the time, but when it comes to spirituality and tapping into the greater cosmos, it becomes a huge barrier because our
right.
predictive nature is assumed. It's not something that we pay attention to, which limits our interaction.
Right.
But yes, Wim, it's just fucking crazy that you said that, because yeah, absolutely, I've heard of him.
So
He's so cool. He's so
yeah.
cool. You
Yeah.
talk about it.
I
Go
mean, I
ahead.
was gonna say, yeah,
Yeah.
he's kind of proving like the power of the mind and the
Hmm.
body because he just through breathing techniques, they injected him with E. coli, and just by doing breathing and just by in a
When did
hospital
he do
setting,
that?
this was uh this was
Back when E. coli was a big thing.
well, it was a few years back, and they had this big
Yeah.
study where they put 12,000, they injected 12,000 people with E. coli. None of them were doing like Wim Hof breathing and his method.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every single one of them got sick. And then Wim
Yeah.
Hof took himself and 12 other people, injected all of them with E. coli, and
Yeah.
they did the breathing and they used the power of the mind, and not a single one of them got sick. So they were able
That's
to,
what I'm saying.
yeah. So we
Yeah.
have these um the body is capable of self-healing if we can tap into it
Oh,
and
yeah.
like
Well,
recognize that.
have you ever heard of Dr. Nadine Burke Harris? I mean, you probably have in some
Yeah.
capacity. She's the Surgeon General for California.
Yeah.
She has a book called The Deepest Well: The Long-Term Effects of Childhood Adversity.
Mm,
She calls it toxic stress. She did about 10 or so years of research on this. She started her own clinic before she became Surgeon General. She uh, worked in a disadvantaged Black neighborhood.
mm,
Um, and she dealt with a lot of systemic racism, a lot of systemic trauma. And she worked with children specifically.
right.
And her practice grew to understand that we all share a common ailment, which is our mental capacities, our mental health,
Mm,
the capacity for mental health and mental illness in that. And she found that physical exercise, basic nutrition, family therapy, so talking through your problems, and meditation practice for children changes them 100%. It turns back the years on their weight gain, their stress levels, their hormones go back into balance, all this stuff. And then she found that, telomeres for DNA, they're like bumpers on the side of your DNA that keep it from eroding
Yeah.
through disease or illness. The longer your telomere, the more able you are to resist virus and RNA viruses and things like that, because it can't penetrate.
Right.
But the shorter you have them, it could be through birth, it could be through toxic atmospheres over a lifetime, it could be any of those things. Not only is toxic stress linked to age-based disease and cancer, so even if you've not lived the most ridiculous life, even if you had stress as a child, if you had any of the ACE test criteria in your life, you're 10% more likely. I believe that was the number. I might be wrong about that, but it's about 10% more likely to have disease, cancer, all these things. And the only there is no pharmaceutical, what do you call it? Oh my God, remedy. Sorry.
Yeah.
There is no pharmaceutical remedy to fixing telomeres. There's only one solution to fixing telomeres. It's meditation.
Mm.
Once you meditate and you balance yourself back out and you commit to a healthy diet, a healthy meditation practice, a healthy physical practice, your body starts to release growth factors, enzymes, all these things, and your telomeres grow.
Right.
They become more stable and more secure and more protective. But you can't do it with a pill. You can't do it with a shot. You can't do it with anything else. There's no plant, as far as I'm aware, unless the book came out a little after I read it, so there might be some new research in the field for sure. I'm sure people are working on it right now.
Probably.
But meditation is it. I just watched a TED Talk on yogic breathing, and there's this guy, and he got a bachelor's in chemistry, and he grew up in a yogic family. They were medicine people. They weren't shamanistic, I don't believe, but they were like physical, like they handled physical medication.
Yeah.
Herbal medication. And he grew up in this really small town and a like really rural town in India. And he was like, I've always been curious as to why my parents and my grandparents and all these people breathe the way they breathe, why they practice the way they practice, because all of my family members live forever. And also they always go, well, I'm drinking it in. And they go, breathe it in, right? And he's like, well, what is that? Like, what's so nourishing about air? And so he learned the yogic breathing, and he learned the meditation and all this stuff. And he learned the way of his family. And then he went and got a bachelor's degree in chemistry. And then he realized that chemistry wasn't exactly where the answer was. So he went and got a master's in cellular biology or something like that. And he got the ability to test yogic breathing in a scientific capacity. So he went and he did a chant, and he did a yogic breathing exercise and some yoga. And then he spit into a tube and he put it through a bunch of tests. And right there and then he found that, again, growth factors, enzymes, hormones immediately releasing through the body based on the chant that he was giving. So the intention has a lot to do with what actually comes into your body and what happens to your body. And then just to be sure, he made his kid do it, who doesn't practice as much as him and isn't really well versed. Had him just do a couple of breathing exercises, the same ones, the same chant, the same yoga. Had him spit into a tube, and he found that it doesn't matter whether you're versed in it or not. It still works. The kids still have the same markers.
Right. Wow.
Like, how crazy is that?
That's incredible.
That's science. Like, that's not new age mysticism. That's
Right.
not, that's none of that. That is the fact of the matter, is that you have control over your health.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with the way we think about it. And that's where, ironically, so I ended up on a whole different thread, which was time and what time is, which was so fun. And the second I think I liberated myself from the construct of time, but it's
always a beautiful thing to do.
it's really phenomenal the way that you realize how much of the shadow we've really accepted,
Yeah.
because it's not time. What we accept as time is not time. And that affects the way that we grow and the way that we learn and the way that we predict. And
Yeah.
that's super important because we arguably are only limited by the predictions we make.
Yeah. 100%. We
And
impose so
uh,
many self limitations. We impose
so
so
it's
many.
self limitations. And that's
Yeah.
where I'm like, where does it come from? Like, okay, so what? I can untrain myself. So, right, like I
Yeah.
stumbled across it and I never stopped,
Right.
no matter how difficult it was. And so if I can do it and you can do it,
Yeah.
my partner can do it, then why can't everybody do it? What's so much stronger about the negative presence in those people? And
Mm,
that's just that part of society. And that's fascinating to me. It's not scary. It doesn't scare me. It doesn't freak me out. It's not something I slip into. I'm like, well, it's a real question with real
right.
answers. So, what is the thing that is keeping people in this self imposed prison?
Hmm. I would
Do
say
the
fear.
people fear, but is it people propagating certain
Like
truths?
I think I
Are
mean
they aware of it?
if you look at I mean if you look at like what is the narrative that is
Yeah.
given by whether it's the governments or the institutions, and it's all about for profit. There's a lot of control elements. So I think we're really
Yeah.
taught from a young age that we
Yeah.
are like the world happens to us instead of the world happening for us and us really
Yeah.
shaping
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
own
That's
reality.
exactly what I grew up on, actually. That's an excellent way to say that because I grew up on that. I used to say all the time, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And especially my mom would always be
Mhm.
like, well, those are things you got to work through because everybody has to deal
Right.
with them. It
Same.
doesn't matter. Like, it's not personal, like all the bad things that happen to you aren't personal. And I'm like, well, why can't somebody help me because they want to?
Right.
Why can't I have the job because I want it? I mean, I'm more than qualified. Why can't I live the life I want to live because I want it? And it's like, because you're ridiculous. Why would you ever think you could do that? And I'm like,
Right.
why wouldn't I? Right? You said it's my life.
Right.
I didn't
Exactly.
ask to be born, okay? You had me and then I was forced to pay taxes. So I don't understand, like, am I supposed to believe that my life is my life and that I have control over it and what I want to do? Or am I supposed to believe that there is no other option and that I'm born because I was an accident and this is just something that I want to have to deal with because of your negligence? In which case, why do I have to deal with your mistakes? I'm
Right.
not your mistake. I'm my own person, right? Like,
Right.
and I'm not saying that my mom ever said I was a mistake or an accident or anything like that.
Right.
I'm saying like that's the implication. And
Yeah.
then you start to realize like, wait, if you're having this conversation with your mom and you've had it for 10 years, 12 years, and there's no change, is there a problem with the language? Is there a problem with the intention? Do people know what intention is? Do people know what awareness is? Do people know what they're saying half the time they're saying it? Because if you ask me, we we're living in a culture that supports a dead language.
Yeah.
It's a zombie,
Yeah.
really,
I would
because
agree.
our language does not mean what it means. It doesn't have the implications that it has. It doesn't. You could say anything, and that's the beauty of English too, right? Is like you can make things up, but maybe it's the quantity of people and the lack of education on what those words actually meant. Because I've had conversations with my partner many, many times about like the importance of language and how you use it.
Right.
And we're now at the same understanding of being intentional and aware. But before it was like, well, I'll just make up my own words. It doesn't matter. I'm like, well, I don't know what you're saying.
Right.
And that's fine. Like, that's totally cool. I appreciate your creativity and if that's the way you want to say it. And why not? Because people don't even use consistent language in the first place. So why
Right.
not just do what you want? But I don't know what you're saying. And that's something I found a lot of helpful information in with Terrence McKenna,
I love Terrence
because
McKenna.
Terrence McKenna has a great description of the incompatibility of expression. It's your dictionary is not the same as my dictionary. So there's a problem when it comes to intention and awareness because we don't have the same definition, but we use the same word. And it's not a matter of multiple meanings. It's a matter of differences in education
Right. Right.
and the reinforcement of that education. Because
Definitely.
you gotta I had physics once,
Right.
and then I went to an aeronautics class in college, and they were like, "You remember your physics, right?" And I was like, "That was 3 years ago, dude. What are you
Like,
talking
not
about?" You know?
really.
And they're like so mass, and then like even when you get down to something as in terms of etymology, something like mass, or like what the void of space is, like there's a huge gap in popular understanding of what these things are and what they actually are in the science community. Mass is not the weight of an object. Mass is the potential energy of an object
Right.
given its atomic composition. That's
Right.
my understanding of it.
Yeah.
So it's not about even calories. Like, what are calories? People don't know what calories are. They're like, well, if I eat too many calories. No, what is a calorie? A calorie is a measurement of energy.
Yeah.
You're
It's all
putting
energy.
X amount of energy into your body, and you have to be able to break down X amount of energy as well. So it's like, if we all knew these things and we
Right.
all had the same definitions, would it be different?
Right. I think it's a good question. And with language, and I think that comes back to energy as well, because it's all about, I think there's something that's more like, in terms of communication, there can be something that is deeper than language. Because
Oh,
like you're saying, there isn't, language is like very personal in a way. It's kind of just what we use as a tool for our communicative spoken words, whatever that may
yeah,
be.
yeah.
But if you
It's
can,
like it's the eye of language.
yeah,
It's the temporary in the moment framing of that expression.
right.
It's not an all-time expression.
Right. And but what is sort of the energy of the intention, and what is the energy
Yeah.
of where it is that you're coming from with your words? And I think that that can be felt almost on a on a, I guess, a subatomic level. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah. No.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called genetic memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's called genetic memory. You just pass it on from person to person. And guess what? Frank Herbert was talking about that in 1965. He wrote a whole series of books on genetic memory and how we access our ancestors through it. Yes, it's a little bit more aggressive because there's like the threat of possession and things like that. Maybe it is like that. Maybe we're just not evolved enough to deal with it. That's 1,000 generations behind us or ahead of us.
right.
So we don't know. But like that's what toxic stress is. That's what your fight or flight response is. That's why people are born with weird ones,
Yeah.
weird systems, weird brain regulations in terms of their symptomatic nervous response to things and their automatic nervous response to things, is because you're born with a set rule of what that should be like based on your ancestors and their experiences,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So is that not language? Are you not being spoken to? Are you not being taught lessons?
Right. No, it's a good
Right?
question. I think it is a form of language. And if anything, you can, it, in a way, you wonder if it's like, are these things that are passed down, is that like destiny in a way, or can you break from
Mm,
it and create your own sort of, like, especially if the things that are passed down, some of them are negative, right? If there are
yeah.
traumas that are going through the generations, and there are certain generational traumas I've recognized within my own family about things like abandonment and just all of
Yeah.
these different concepts, and it's like, well, my natural conditioning, I want to act on that, and like it would feel almost
Yeah.
like instinctual, but you can break that pattern and sort of
You
create
can. It's
create
not
new.
predestined.
Right.
It's the term of destiny is like what you're it's not predeterministic. Destiny can be one of two things. It can be predeterministic or it can be reactional to what you're doing.
Right.
And like I would say, like for example, my destiny is to talk about these things and to build work that explains these things and dives into them and liberates the human race
Yeah.
that comes into contact with it. It might sound pretentious, but ultimately that's what I'm doing. And I don't see anything wrong with it. But if you told me, like, oh, it was my destiny, I would take it as, yeah, ultimately that's my goal. So
Yeah.
any path I take, no matter what it is, I'll end up there.
Right.
But if it's predeterministic in a Baptist sense, then I don't have any control. I'm just going straight through it.
Right.
And everything I suffer was already predetermined for me. Everything that I come to the conclusion of was already inside me. I just wasn't allowed to know it until a certain time. And that becomes kind of pessimistic, I think.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of agency away. And I think I've made a lot of choices that nobody expected me to make. So,
Right.
even in my own family, where it's like, I don't think I'm on a predeterministic path
Right.
to this thing. I think I just have an intention towards something. and I'm following that intention
Right.
as far
No,
as I can.
I would agree. And I think it's deeply connected to sort of like the grand question of like, why are we here? Like, what am I here
Yeah,
to do? Who am I
that's it.
here to be? And
That's all.
when you
Yeah,
can narrow down your intention, I think everybody has a unique like purpose, a unique expression, something that they can give as a gift to the
yeah,
world, like in service. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I think everybody is like meant to be in
But
service.
isn't there a weird connotation or ultimate default definition to servant, being servant, like a servant of any sort? It's like being subservient or submissive
Yeah.
instead of being like, no, I doing this for your good. Like
Right.
I'm bringing you a gift.
Yeah.
Like somebody giving you a gift on your birthday could be considered a servant. They're
Yeah.
serving you, correct?
Yeah.
They're at your birthday party. They're giving you something for your birthday. They're making you feel good about the day you were born.
Right.
They're serving you.
Right.
So, but you would never go, oh yeah, that person giving me a gift, they're submissive, they're disgusting and pitiful. You'd be like, oh, thanks for the gift. Yeah, that's really
Right.
great. So, even in that, there's such a subtle change in the way that we look at the language. Like, I brought this up with Amanda too. It's like my friend was like, my parents are good. They're good people. And I was like, are they good or are they well-meaning, good
Mm,
intentioned? And they were kind of like, oh, I don't, like I have to think about that. But like there is a difference, right? There's a
yeah.
difference in that language. Are they good people in the sense that they do good things and they make active effort to do good things, even if they slip up, they still always come back? Or are they people who quote unquote have good intentions and never really deliver,
Mm,
right? Because that's
right.
not the same thing. That's where the road to hell is paved with good intentions thing comes from,
Yeah.
because good intentions aren't good enough. It's also the practice behind the intention,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's where like language, if you really look at the English language, it's not even like funny how disparate it is, how like nonsensical and like um what's the word? Will just say it again because I'll bring it up again because it's just so pertinent. But like in the Messiah Dune book, they talk about the time stream being filled with
Mhm.
tarot. Sorry, the Dune tarot is being thrown out there, and so all of these half-assed mystics are just like clouding up the so-called energy of the universe, and it's making it difficult for people like Paul to navigate it and make actual decisions. And that was a choice made by the people who wanted him to fall, so
Mm,
they purposefully obscured the true meaning and mechanics behind this thing as much as they could. They essentially turned a clear stream into a muddy swamp, with the purpose of distracting and confusing and you know energizing this negative conflict. And it again, the question comes up: what is causing this dead language to seemingly be alive because it's not alive?
right.
There's a lot of contradiction in the way that we speak and the way that we communicate.
Right.
Um, where did that come from? Where did that start? Because I don't know if I could put a single finger on it. I don't. Did it come from England? Like, did it
Right.
come from the Native American population? Did it come from the Spanish, and their empire in Mexico and them trying to take over lands in the Southwest? Is it specifically a Southwestern thing? Is it, there's so many ways to approach that problem.
Right.
Um,
I feel it's very representative of sort of
yeah,
the human condition in a lot of ways, though. Like
yeah,
it formulated in the way that it is because we are as a species so separate and contradictory and not in
yeah,
um connection to oneness, not in connection to, what you were just talking about the Doom book. I was
yeah.
like, wow, that sounds an awful lot like today with the,
Yeah, doesn't
distractions
it?
and
Right? I mean, like what's going on in the news? You couldn't divine the truth out of that shit. You couldn't be like, well, is Marjorie Taylor Greene actually a Nazi? You wouldn't. I mean, obviously the answer is yes, but the level of like subterfuge, of like, oh, I'm hiding it. I feel like that's intentional now, but I don't necessarily think that the you know language as a whole or the communication as a whole is was always meant to be unintentional. I
right.
think I think it was so many people with different meanings of intention
Yeah.
I mean, we're a melting pot. So like
Yeah.
this country is a really good example of what happens if you're not aware all the time. Because if you have 14 different cultures mixing and mingling with different languages, different subsets of English, different dialects, whatever you want to call them, and then they all have different meanings for different things, over 100 years, that's going to become complicated and meaningless
Right.
because there's not a unifying thread. It's not an attack against individuality. It's more like an attack against the understanding, intention, and awareness behind the thing that is becoming individual. Because if you're looking at it that way, you're like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with Italian Americans speaking Italian and American and blending the two together. There's nothing wrong with Spanglish. There's nothing wrong with that stuff. It's just the meanings of them become removed from the actual thing that's being said.
Right.
And that's really dangerous because then you get some, we have conversations all the time, me and my partner, where we're like, oh, is that what you meant? Or did you mean this? Because they'll say something and then I'll get upset, or I'll say something and they'll get upset and they'll be like, you said this. I'll be, no, I said this. And then it's like, wait, okay. Oh, I can see where you got confused, but
Right. Right.
that takes a lot of effort to see where the other person's getting confused.
No, right. Definitely. And I think it comes down to there's this great book. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's called The Four Agreements, and it's Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
the
think
what are they called?
some of the agreements that are in there, like just don't take anything personally and
Yeah,
be
yeah.
like be impeccable with your word. Just like some of these like almost basic ideas, I think can have so much power in
That's so cool that you brought that up. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off.
I
I
was
just had
yeah,
an idea.
that's I
Yeah,
was gonna say they just have a lot of power and
yeah,
they can sort of
yeah,
resolve some of these issues if more people start to embody that. There's always gonna be miscommunications that exist, but it's
yeah,
like
yeah. Absolutely.
if I'm not taking anything personally, then it's like, okay, maybe maybe I misinterpreted what they
Yeah.
said.
Is it
Maybe
that big of a deal?
right,
Like
exactly.
like if somebody gets mad at me for saying something the wrong way, why am I upset that they took it the wrong way? If the whole intention behind it was, it's not what you said, it's how you said it.
Yeah.
Because where I come from, that means something different. Why am
Right.
I upset with that? Why can't I
Right.
just go, hey, oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, well, where I come from, this is what this means. So I totally apologize. And we just, that's it.
Yeah.
It's neutralized. Why do I take it so personally? And one of the things I read that actually, I also gave it to my roommate,
Mhm.
and they were like, see, I told you nobody has any influence over you ever. And I was like, no, that's not what that means.
Yeah.
And I actually saw a documentary, like a little tiny, like 10-minute thing on YouTube, where they talked to somebody who grew up in that culture, who grew up
Mhm.
in that practice. And there's a huge bit of information missing from that book, which is that they consider every person in that belief to be dreaming actively throughout their life, which
Mm.
is manifesting, right?
Right.
So the thing about that that's really interesting is that the book itself comes off as a philosophical body of work of like, well, these are rules that normal people follow, and like in our practice this is what we do. But that's not entirely true. It's actually more of a statement of like, we should live as though we're dreaming.
Yeah.
Here's how we can do that, not here's a right or wrong moral stance on something.
Right.
So when it's like, oh yeah, well, somebody has an effect on you, it's not, no, nobody ever has an effect on you, and if you have a
Right.
problem with it, then you're taking it personally and you're stupid. it's
Right.
it's imagine yourself not being engaged with that. Dream of a life where you do not engage with it, because your definition has changed, your relationship has changed, and your practice has changed. That's what they're saying. And I don't think that came across in the book.
No, I
So
don't think so.
there's a subtext, a context of dreaming while being awake that is missing from that. And I think it's because of the commercial aspect of the book. Because I think otherwise the tenets are they're pretty much the same. It's just
Right.
the context is different. And even then, right there, how many people have read that book, and how many people know that?
Right. Yeah, I was gonna
Not a
say.
lot of people. Like that's a big thing, because then you start to become something else. And so if you start looking at that kind of culture, you're like, well, it doesn't really work. It doesn't work in the modern day because blah 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 blah. And you're like, wait, but you weren't even really engaging with the actual work itself because you didn't even know what it was about.
Mm.
So that's a miscommunication right there, and a best-selling book
Right.
about an ancient culture. And it's probably not even intentional. That
Right.
disconnection is probably unintentional. And that's just beautiful. There's something really interesting when you see the cracks, and then you go, there's something to fix. There's something to fix. Oh, that's an easy solution. I can go talk about this, or I can make something on that. Instead of being like, oh, well, if bestsellers are miscommunicating, then nothing's ever true. Like that's such a,
Right.
so that's an easy way to go down, right?
Oh,
It's very
definitely.
easy to like not trust anybody now.
No, definitely, definitely. I mean, that's sort of
Yeah.
what we're um, told, what we're told to believe. I mean, I see a lot of cynicism and distrust, but I see it and I can't like get angry at it because I totally
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah.
Like
I understand. Yeah.
it's like I see how this happens, but I think it all comes back to that, just the idea of intention and being connected to beyond the self, like
Yeah.
beyond your own ego, like looking outside of like what greater like purpose am I serving here? Like I
Yeah.
think we get so caught up in the day to day of our own lives, we sort of forget what is the grand scheme of this. Like we're in the universe, we're on a planet that's like
Well,
a flying ball in the middle of nowhere. Like, but like, what is the
and it's
purpose of that?
moving.
And it's moving at like
And the galaxy's
unfathomable
moving
rates,
forward. You're
right?
like, okay, cool.
The
Yeah.
universe is
What is
practically
anything?
infinite, right? So
Yeah, it
it's
is. And it's really interesting too when you look at like, so I think the issue with oneness in theory is the understanding of what oneness is.
yeah,
It's not uniformity.
right.
That's not what
I
we're
agree.
talking about here. It's not, we're all the same, we all do the same thing, we all work towards the same goal. I mean, ultimately, yes, we all do work towards the same goal, but it's not a factory.
Right. You could
We're
take
not we're
that and
not
put a very totalitarian spin on
Yeah,
it.
you could absolutely, but you're not just putting out like, it's not like Hasbro just mass manufacturing the same Optimus Prime.
Right.
It's like, no, 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 no. We're all unique and different, and because of that, we're actually more geared to be one as a
Yes.
collective consciousness, because when you're different, you have something to add. And collective consciousness is a pool in which every living thing places or posits its collective intelligence from
Yeah.
an entire lifetime. So if you look at it that way, it's actually kind of really wholesome. It's incredibly wholesome because you realize like, oh, because I'm unique, I am part of the whole.
Right.
Interesting. It's not because I'm the same. So arguably, if you were the same, you'd be doing the whole a disservice,
Right. No, definitely.
right?
I mean, a 1,000 piece puzzle, every single piece is going to be
Yeah.
different
It's
to
going to be a little
create
different. Yeah. And some of
the
them may
puzzle.
overlap. You may be part of one big image. Doesn't matter, because that
Right.
image couldn't have been possible without 100 million, 100 billion. It doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is like the idea behind oneness, and this is largely a policy problem in the United States. Socialism is not bad. It's not.
Mhm.
Communism is. I was watching Mank. I don't know if you saw that on Netflix, but
No, I
it's
haven't seen it.
David Fincher's new movie. And Mank is like the difference between socialism and communism is that in socialism we get to share the wealth. In
Mm.
communism, we get to share the we get to share the poverty,
Right.
and
No, it makes
that's
sense.
true. And that's the thing. And I've always argued that. It's not that I'm a socialist. I just think that the way we're running things is pretty horrible. It doesn't promote the things that we're talking about, and it also actually goes, well, wholeness as a consciousness is garbage.
Mm.
And
Right.
also, we're taught to understand that we could never achieve that.
Right. Which is not
But
true.
if you've ever meditated, you suddenly realize that, I don't know, somehow you're gaining knowledge you could have never known because you never studied that thing.
Right.
You're healing yourself in ways that you could have never done because only Wolverine can do that shit, you know?
Right.
And then you start realizing like a lot of other things are strange. Like, oh, wait, the world isn't what I think it is at all.
Yeah.
This planet I live on, my physical experience is one predictive, which is limiting a lot of what I could be experiencing. But even if you take psychedelics, like I in that neuroscience, I watched one on, actually, sorry, it was a separate one. It was a separate neuroscience and geometry with psychedelics lecture where they were talking about how DMT specifically interacts with the brain and how it changes our perceptions of the world through different dosages. It's
Mm.
really, really interesting. And it was done at Harvard or something like that. So it's like, you can't even yell at me for being a hippie or whatever, because it
Right.
doesn't even matter. Harvard's doing it. It was some Ivy League school. And they were showing how the geometry that we see when we live on psychedelics, when we're experiencing on psychedelics, that geometry is actually in everything that we've ever done.
Right.
Everything we've
100%.
ever done.
Yep.
They were talking about parabolic and what's the kind of geometry? Euclidean
Yeah.
geometry, parabolic and Euclidean oh my God, that's so hard to say. Euclidean and parabolic geometry are present in things like kale. And depending on the symmetry, they have different kinds of nutrients for different purposes.
Mm.
And all these things. And they're just talking about it. And they're like, yeah, actually on DMT, you see more color. But how is that possible if our brain only can interact with 3 different color cones?
Right. Right. Well,
So there's a
yeah.
lot we don't understand. And there's a lot of stuff that we actually do understand. We just write it off as like, oh, this yogic in the,
Yeah.
in the Himalayas, he's just like so removed, it doesn't really know what's going on. Or like,
If,
oh, there's, like
if
a hip
anything,
in
that I was
Sedona.
going to say, if anything, that yogic
Yeah.
in the Himalayas has a deeper understanding of what's going on, right?
There's
Because,
there's a yogi who's, I forget his name. I could probably try to find him for you if you're interested, but he stopped aging at 40 or
oh, wow.
35 or something, and he lived to be 100.
Wow.
And the thing that's crazy about that story is that he seemingly died not from age, but just from the desire to not really want to experience what he was experiencing anymore. Like he had learned enough and he just wanted to move on.
Fair
Like
enough.
he stopped aging at 35, 40 years old, maintained the strength, the liveliness, the practice for the rest of his life, lived about 100 years, and then just died. And he was just like, I'm done. I don't want to,
That is fascinating. I mean,
right? And it makes Wim look like
chump.
an ant in
Yeah, I was
comparison,
going to
right?
say.
But he's also like crazy. He can control his body temperature by breathing,
Yeah.
his core body temperature. He can control his bodily response to E. coli
Right.
or
Right.
Ebola, or which one was
It
it?
was E. coli, right?
E.
E. coli,
coli.
and
Yeah, E.
he's
coli.
run
Yeah.
like
Okay.
marathons in the Arctic barefoot.
Yeah,
Like he's
barefoot. He doesn't give a fuck. It's fine.
so it just shows like the power of the
Yeah.
human when we're tapped into it. I mean, our like everyday experience is from sort of like the five senses, like five
Yeah.
sensory perspective. But when you take psychedelics, a whole like it's almost like a veil is lifted into
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
things that are already there, but we can't experience them within our sort of limited
Well, because of the self
senses.
limitation.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And that's, I actually spoke with Amanda about it again, not to bring her up all the time, but we did just talk about this. It's like the reason that there's negative feedback with like psilocybin for treating depression, PTSD and anxiety and things like that is because you gave these guys clear vision. You gave them total vision of what the world really is, and then you took it away from them and shoved them back into the system and expected them to be fine when their anxiety, their PTSD, their addiction, whatever they're dealing with stemmed from that machine that you just stuck
Right.
them back into. And then people go, well, psilocybin causes mental lapses and psychotic episodes, and you're like, no, it doesn't actually.
Right.
If you actually took psilocybin in any capacity, take 2.5 grams. That's a good high.
Yeah.
You will feel endless compassion for everybody and everything. You'll think deeper and more complexly about things that you never thought about before.
Right. Definitely.
And that's where meditation and things like that come in to be super helpful, because then you're like, okay, well, I can maintain that understanding. I can maintain that awareness. I can maintain that positivity.
Right.
But I've been called out for taking psilocybin sometimes, where they're like, well, you freaked out because you had, like I'll point out something like my parents, like I called and I was like, this made me feel weird. I don't know why this happened. This is something I didn't agree with. Could we talk about it? And, I was like, somehow let slip that I had done, like I'd just come off the high of psilocybin when they called.
Mm.
And I was totally sober. I had a great day. There was nothing wrong. I'd
Yeah.
sat by the fucking creek all day and stared at the sky, like, yeah,
Mm.
psychotic episode, my ass. And and they were like, oh, well, you're a drug addicted person who like,
Uh,
they got mad, like, because I pointed out something that was rightfully wrong. It was something I was allowed to bring up, and it was something I'm allowed to not deal with if I don't want to deal with it. And I brought it up, and they were like, psilocybin brings up feelings that you don't actually have, and it convinces you of things, and I'm like, whoa, 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 hold the fuck up. Actually, every psychedelic is a mirror.
yeah,
So if anything comes up, it was already there.
yeah,
Excuse me. Second of all, you've never taken psilocybin clearly, or you've never dealt with anything that you've ever had problems with clearly, because if you took psilocybin and you chilled the fuck out and you let it do its thing and you let everything negative, quote unquote, that comes up, and you just let it brush over you and you just embraced it,
yeah.
you could have cried it out and been fine. You could have
Exactly.
you could have gone the rest of your day just like, oh my God, I'm a new person. Whoa,
Yeah.
And it's not like heroin, which
Right.
destroys your nerve endings and your synapses and connection throughout your brain. It's not that. It's not that at all. In fact, they've had scientific studies that show that your brain grows connections every
Right.
time you take it. So all those arguments about psychedelics are just ridiculous.
Oh
LSD
yeah.
is a little different. I haven't tried it myself yet, but it is a man-made compound.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
you have to be aware of the fact that, like, you can't fuck up mushrooms. You can't.
Yeah.
Even if it's just not a good mushroom, fine, but you can't mess them up. LSD is made by somebody with a very unique expertise. So you have to
Right.
be really, really sure what you're doing when you take it, that you're with the right people, that you
Yep.
are in the right emotional space. But the thing is like psilocybin and things like that, like, you realize you've already been through the gum jabber. Like, you've already been through the most intense pain you'll ever feel
Yeah.
in your life, especially if you have a mental condition
Right.
like anxiety or depression or BPD or schizophrenia, any of those. Because those are things that most people who don't have them go through like once every month or once every couple months or whatever. They can manage to just avoid it completely. But you deal with that intense pain every day, if not 3-4 times a week.
Right.
So like, once you realize you've been through the worst of it, you're like, I don't know if LSD could show me anything that could scare me. you
Right.
know, but even then, like, you have to still take it at the value of being a mirror.
Yeah. That's what it's
You're
all
only
about.
seeing yourself. You're only seeing yourself. And if that's something that you're scared of, then it's a tool. Everything that you ever do is a tool for better understanding, better interaction, better integration. You have to choose to see it that way, and you have to be willing to do the work. But psilocybin's not going to turn you fucking crazy. I
Right.
microdosed once and I had a BPD attack, and it was way worse than a normal BPD attack. Why? Because I was feeling the exact thing I was feeling without any of the limitations I would have put on myself otherwise.
Mm.
I was
Right.
feeling that pure emotion. Does it mean that the psilocybin caused it? Absolutely not. That was already there. And I realized afterwards, I was like, I don't know why I feel like this. I'm like sobbing. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then it clicked. And I was like, oh, I microdosed. Oh shit. I don't even feel it, but it's real subtle. And
Right.
you know what? Even then, I still was better afterwards. I've
Right.
never had a similar BPD attack ever. It's all gone downhill since then, in terms of its intensity, not in terms of my ability to handle it. I mean,
Right.
like, it's gotten better, right? Like, I've never gone to that extreme since then.
Mm.
And when I get close, I'm able to pull myself back in a way I couldn't before.
Right. 'Cause that's the
Right?
learning. That's the growth.
Right. That's the learning. My brain learned how to deal with it better, because as I felt that through the psilocybin experience, my brain grew new connections that enabled me to deal with things differently. It's just like, it's unbelievable. I could talk about it forever because it really is that true. But it's
Yeah.
like, I don't understand where people think they get off on, like, well, you're a psycho crazy person because you take psychedelics.
I
It's
think
like,
I was
okay.
well, there was a big marketing, like, or I
Yeah.
guess not marketing camp. You could call it a marketing campaign against them in the late '60s, early '70s.
Propaganda campaign.
Propaganda campaign. That's exactly
Yeah.
what it was.
Anything that was un-American,
Right.
including, but even LSD was American, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Oh, I think it was Albert Hoffman was the guy who made it.
Yeah,
So I don't know if he made it in America, but
I think he
during the
did. I watched it
counterculture.
because he did. There was a Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia episode on it,
Hmm.
and the guy who created LSD, and he was, I think he was American.
Okay.
At least he went to school here and then he made it here,
Yeah.
but it was illegal. And even DMT, like, why is DMT so bad? You're born with it, you
We
die with
naturally
it.
produce it.
You naturally produce it. So why are you telling me I can't take DMT?
Right. It's a good
If
question.
that is something that always heals people, it always heals them. I don't care what you think of Joe Rogan. He's fascinating.
Oh
He's
yeah.
awesome. He's cool because he talks to everybody and he gives everybody a fair shake.
He's very
And
authentic.
he's very authentic. And he will explain DMT. He's talked about it. And he's been like, I've never had a bad DMT experience. He's like, even the ones that were kind of like edgy, the ones that kind of freaked me out, not bad. They're just things I found out about myself. He gives this whole thing about how he took DMT and he had a vision where he realized he was taking himself too seriously,
Yeah.
and that it was like his ego was rubbing off on people. And he was like, I'm a fucking asshole. I'm gonna stop doing that. And that's not to say like he hates himself or anything. That's just to
Right.
say that's the way he talks, right? That's just the way he talks. It's not,
Yeah.
just watch
Yeah.
Joe Rogan. That's the way he talks. Um, but then there are millions of other things that like it's a veiled thing, right? And I think about the counterculture, and then I think about Dr. Stephen Greer, and then I think
Mm.
about Bob Lazar,
Yeah.
and I'm like, those poor people. I love them. I love them. My heart goes to them. I'm on their side. I will always support them. The FBI can come to my house right now and knock down my door. I don't give a fuck. They are
Same.
true. They are right. They
Yeah.
are telling the truth. And for you to obscure that from us is bullshit. Because I will tell you what, on the night of the conjunction, we went out camping and we watched it. We watched the star come across. And on the horizon, like I'm sitting up on a mountain watching a valley. Like there's no
Yeah.
obstruction. There are lights, orbs on the horizon that come in and then fade a little bit, come back in, fade a little bit, come back in, and then slowly fade out.
Hmm.
And then they come back in the same fucking spot. They're not stars. They're not stars. They're
Right.
different colors. They're like green, red, blue. They're too tall to be towers. I mean, I'm looking across like 50, 60 miles. Like, right, I'm looking at the horizon, right?
Yeah.
So they're not like stars peeking through the thing. I once saw a jellyfish fucking thing flying across the sky. It was the
Wow.
craziest thing. I was up here at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, and we were at this like, there's the main observatory, and then if you drive up, there's another observatory, and they do like some light experiments and stuff, like atmospheric studies and stuff. And we were just watching. Actually, on my YouTube, I'm doing a series A through Z, and A is the time that I saw it, and I just set that up, and we were sitting in the back of the car, and I wasn't even high yet. I smoked pot. I wasn't even high yet. I was just laying in the car looking out, and it looked just right over here. It looked like a comet, but it wasn't a
Oh.
comet because I've seen a comet, because comets splinter off, they piece
Right.
off, and they dissolve, or I guess burn up, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And this wasn't it. It was the same pulsing. It pulsed, it went forward, and it was like a whole thing opened up like this, some
Oof.
trails, and then it just disappeared. And I was like, fuck yeah, that's a fucking spaceship right there. What the fuck is that? And I look at it and I'm like, Bob Lazar told the same story for 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years. He never lied. He never changed the story. He still hasn't changed the story. He
Yep.
still draws the same pictures, everything. He's a guy from the counterculture era.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
interesting. So they didn't want LSD, DMT, mushrooms, any psychedelics in the counterculture era when we were trying to destabilize American policies towards dictatorship. Interesting. So Bob Lazar happened then, LSD happened then. You're looking at somebody like Dr. Greer, who's literally put together extraterrestrial contact protocols
Yeah.
for at least 3 presidencies. And he's telling you things. I don't know if you noticed this. I watched his newest one. I didn't see the first one, The Close Encounters of the Third Kind or something like that. I just watched The Fifth Kind,
Yeah.
and it was free with Amazon Prime. And it's stunning. You know why? Because we remember seeing the first official Pentagon UFO confirmation in April of last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah. I do remember
And,
that.
and it was a spaceship, and the people are like, "Oh my god, it's like moving like a 100 miles an hour against the wind.
Yeah.
What the fuck?" You know, they're like,
Yeah.
you can go look at it. It's out there. They covered that whole thing up really fast, by the way.
Oh, of
They put
course
it
they did.
out, and then they just dumped everything on top of it, and they were like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah."
Of
And
course.
and then it turns out that in Stephen Greer's first documentary, The Third Kind, I believe that's what it's called. I might be wrong,
Yeah.
or it's Unacknowledged. Sorry, Unacknowledged. That's what it's called. He showed that footage 20 days before it was officially released and confirmed by the Pentagon.
Mm,
So it makes you wonder who put that out actually. Did Greer put that out because he's tired of people dying for dumb shit like this? Because he's talked about in his new one how he watched a lot of military men die, like kill themselves um, because of the fact that they knew these things. They weren't allowed to tell anybody. They were gaslit for their entire careers. He's
right.
had like generals come up to him and be like, "Hey, you know that thing that we both know? How do you know that? How does it feel? Have you not killed yourself yet? Because I know a lot of people who can't handle it." And he's like, "Yeah, I do too. It's fucking horrible." And like, if you watch this movie, he starts crying, and you're like, "That shit's real. That's some real." He's not an actor. He's not.
Right.
It's very clear he's not an actor. He's a fucking doctor,
Right.
and he's crying for real. That's not. It's hard to watch people go through that kind of stuff because like I know he's telling the truth,
Yeah.
but I can't do anything about it except for
Right.
talk about it with people like you
Right. That's the thing. Well, we
and
can
whoever
spread
listens.
greater awareness. I mean, if you
Right,
think,
right.
if you spread the awareness, I mean, I've had encounters where it's interesting. Have you like I've talked to my like encounters come in like the meditation actually. And it's interesting
Oh
when you
yeah,
get
okay,
to a higher
yeah,
frequency, there's
yeah.
almost like um extraterrestrials that live in a higher frequency because we're stuck in this third
Well,
dimensional world.
have you heard about what fifth dimensional objects would look like in the fourth dimension? Have you seen the math on that?
I mean, it would be like trying to take a 3D like pyramid and put it onto a
Yeah,
piece of paper and it
yeah,
would become a 2D triangle.
yeah.
That's what I would
So
envision.
these orbs that we saw on the conjunction are
Yeah.
UFOs because they're in a higher
Yeah.
dimension
Yeah.
coming down, and that's the way they're represented. They're represented as light here
Yeah.
because whatever structure they have, whether it's fully, pierce the veil or they're just skimming or whatever, it doesn't matter. That's the way it would appear to us,
Right.
right? And so that's fascinating. And that's actually true. If you look at what a hypersphere looks like in our reality, mathematically, it looks exactly like UFOs. Sorry about it. I'm not gonna lie. It's exactly that. And to kind of like go back to Greer a little bit, there I don't know if you remember, but the Israeli space security force captain dude, I don't remember the exact. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
He said that he came out, this Israeli space force guy, and he was like, "Hey, there's a galactic confederacy,
Yeah.
and
Yep. Galactic Federation.
they've been hanging out with us, and like they're kind of disappointed because they need us to understand what time is and what space actually is,
Right.
and what spaceships are before we can even join them." And guess who talked about it again almost a month before it was released by this Israeli guy? Dr. Greer and his
Greer.
fucking,
Yep.
I did the math. I looked at it. I looked at the dates. He said it first. He said it first publicly. And then the Israeli guy was like, "I'm going to do it now too, because it's true." Like, you
Right.
can't ignore the facts. You can't ignore them. They're there. And it's absolutely fascinating. And even Terrence McKenna was like, DMT puts you in a space where these beings, they don't
Right.
exist as physical beings. They exist as light
They're
beings. They're light.
exactly.
They speak, and when they speak, they manifest because they're using light to manifest things. And it's really hard not to get involved with it when you're doing it because it's so beyond your capability. And he's like every time they teach me, every time, but I come back and I can't remember. He's like,
Mm.
every time, I don't know. It's like whatever the process is of re-entering my body, like it's just so aggressive that it shakes it out of me or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
And that's so true. Like, it's very, very true. There are things I've had to trip psilocybin like 5 or 6 times to be able to really remember what psilocybin's like when I'm on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
like
No,
to
I relate
remember
to
it
that.
and to call upon it, because I used to be like, well, why can't I feel it when I'm not high? Like, that's such a interesting thing. And then I would be like, well, I want to feel that way all the time.
Right.
And so my practice of intentional awareness has helped me maintain that state of assumedly bliss. I don't know what to call it.
I would call it bliss. Definitely.
But yeah,
Definitely.
it's like a relief.
Right.
It's this non-interaction with everything around you and being able to just take it for what it is,
Right.
that I'm not able to do on a daily basis because of the prisons I've been either stuck in or made myself.
Right. No, I can relate to
Yeah,
that. I mean, I've had
yeah,
meditative experiences that
yeah,
were more powerful than psychedelic experiences. So
yeah,
these states
absolutely.
are
Yeah.
accessible. Like
I,
um we can learn in meditation. We can grow and we can like access this like at any time because we produce the DMT in our brain anyways. What's preventing us from
yeah,
just like
yeah. Well,
tapping into it?
well, because we've been told we can't.
Right.
And that's the
Exactly.
thing with time, right? So I thought about that. I was like, what does this guy mean? What time is? What spaceships are?
Yeah.
And then I realized he didn't say time. He said time space.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, time space. Well, what's time space? Kind of walked back through it. And I was like, well, gravity is time space, but gravity isn't a force in its own right. It's a consequence of other forces interacting. So gravity is due to mass, and mass is due to particles, which come from where? Well, if the Higgs field is something that is um, between, it gives mass to things. Essentially,
Right.
all things, and I don't know that people know this, but essentially, all things are massless. It's the Higgs field that gives them mass.
Right.
And so, where did that energy come from exactly? Because something would have had to permeate the Higgs field in order for it to take a physical form and complete this holographic universe that we live in.
Right.
And only 4% of that universe is physical matter as we see it. The rest of it is dark matter, which is insane. And I think only 10% of it is dark energy, which is there's some crazy you look it up. It's a
Yeah.
fucking pie chart on Google. But it's basically, they're like, there's like this energy. Everything that we do is energetic. Everything that we're made up of is energetic. Everything that we see is energetic. And so if you think about that, there has to be one source pulsating, or whatever you want to call it, that sends energetic vibrations into the Higgs field, which then translates them like
Yeah.
vinyl record music into vinyl record through a megaphone or whatever you want to call it. Um, that's what we're experiencing. And that's ultimately where we all go back to.
Yeah.
So then you think of that and you're like, okay, well, then what is time? Because there is no such thing as time. The only reason I sleep is because my immune system needs a chance to reboot because it takes up so much energy.
Right.
So I actually wouldn't need to sleep if my immune system weren't so capable.
Right.
And so what does that mean? For 8 hours a day or less or more, I go unconscious, but it doesn't mean the world stops around me. There's no such thing as day and night. There's only such thing as revolution.
Mm.
And then you start to think about it in that capacity, and you're like, okay, so wait, there is no one day, there's no 2 days, there's no 3 days, there's no week, there's no month, there's not before and after. All of this is a current present moment I've always lived in and always will until I pass on. And then my present experience will be present forevermore, because wherever I'm going, there is no such thing as gravity.
Right.
So, or physical boundary.
Right.
It's just literally a mind construct. It's energy with energy. And once you're pure energy with pure energy, you can do anything you want. And so when you realize that, you realize what the bigger question is what prisons are we trapped in?
Right.
Because time doesn't exist. We live in one perpetual day, night, which actually should be called an experience, not,
Yeah.
I call them episodes, right? Because I wake up, I have to go to sleep. So I have episodes, but they're all one episode. They're just broken up by moments of unconsciousness. And then you start to realize, like, okay, so everything's spherical when
Right.
it comes down to it. So the shape of our universe is a sphere. Now, I'm not a quantum physicist, but I know that. I don't, and there's no disputing it. Our universe is a sphere. And in fact, sacred geometry is just the movement of energy on any plane.
Right.
So when you talk about sacred geometry, you're like, okay, cool. So, um, for example, if you took if you took a map of any planet's orbit around the sun, and then you take into account that the universe is moving, like in a forward motion at a slant,
Right.
and you drag that motion across and you map it continuously, you're acting out sacred geometry.
Mm.
Everything you do is sacred geometry. It's sacred because it's fundamental. It's not sacred because it's holy. It's sacred because there is nothing below that. That's its
Right.
fundamental part, right? And then you realize, so every word I say is a geometrical observation. Everything I do, and meaning interaction, is a geometrical observation. Think about it. Where do you go? Do you walk around your house in the same pattern? Do you go out and then to the store and back? How many paths do you retrace in an entire time that you live somewhere? Because it's not just moment by moment. It's also, you know, era by era. You know, these things build up, and so
Yeah.
we're also at the whims of like planetary consciousness, which is also something you might think, well, that's a huge jump. No, it's not, because our planets are basically brains without bodies.
Yeah.
They have, I always think about this. I'm like, how do people not know that the earth is literally a brain? I don't know
Right.
how people don't understand that, because you have the coral reefs, which have a perfect acidity. The ocean has a perfect acidity, it used to. And then we came from vents on the bottom of the fucking ocean where gases were passed through us into the water. Now, of course, you think, well, if it's a brain, then it needs electrical capacity, it needs biochemistry and all these things. Are you
Right.
fucking kidding me? The ocean covers most of the planet.
Right.
Gases create electrical charges as they cross through liquid. We all know this. Air is a liquid, by the way.
Right.
It's not a gas, it's a liquid.
Yeah.
Aerodynamics is a liquid science. And then you look at it and you're like, okay, so the core is spinning. There's heat. There are actually many, many connections through the use of fungus and plant life, vegetation. Humans do the same thing. What do we do? I was like, because people always go, humans are parasites. I'm like, are we, or are we supposed to actually incite climate change?
Mm.
Are we supposed to evolve the planet? Because every time it changes, it just builds on its evolution. The planet
Right.
never changes. We change. The
Right.
planet just builds on its own evolution until it's totally its own thing. So the planet actually has its own astral consciousness in the same way we do.
Right.
And actually, I even came up with a theory on like how to read planets and like how to read their language. Because if the Higgs field is analogous to vinyl, then the planets, circling through and wobbling, create etches in this fabric that can be read back. And you think about all these things, and then you start to realize, oh, wait, the universe itself is alive. The spherical nature of the universe means that it is a single organism. And I don't know if I believe that we're the universe experiencing itself. I don't think I agree with that 100%, but I do see it. I
Right.
think that it's more deep than that. I think that we really are individuals who live our own individual lives within a giant organism.
Right. Right.
Galaxies, star systems, clusters, everything you see in the sky, they've mapped it. Neuronets.
Mm.
It's neuronets. Like, it's impossible not to see it. They've mapped dark matter. Neuronets. You want to know where the synapses are? Well, guess what? Your planets and your stars and all this rotation and stuff, your powerhouses. This is where the energy comes from. The synapsis is the foundation of dark matter. It's what's holding these things in place and channeling that energy. You're literally living inside something that is infantile. It's
Yeah.
gestating. And over trillions of billions of years, it becomes a fully living being until it dies like everything else. And then it restarts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like once you look into that question of like, well, what is time, what is space time, and what are spaceships? It's a chain. It's a fucking chain of like interactions and realizations.
Right.
And
No,
then you
definitely.
start to realize like, okay, well then what is time? Why can I see the future? Because I can see the future. I have dreams, I have premonitions and what I call impressions. How
Okay.
does that work then? What is the
It's the
science
same
behind
thing.
that? Yeah. Yeah. Well, the premonitions are always abstract for me.
Yeah.
So the premonitions are like things I have to like symbolically uh, break down.
Right. Right.
But whereas like impressions are just moments in time that have become so important to me for whatever energetic reason. that they're almost transmitted back to a different point in my life. So they happen exactly the same way. It's like deja vu, essentially, is what an impression is.
Yeah.
And that's my understanding of it, is that it's not something I'm predestined to experience. It's something I experienced and am now sharing with my past. So
Wow.
it's a unique understanding. I don't think I've ever heard that one before, but that's the way I understand it. And so, like, if that's the case, how do these things work? How does intuition work? How does premonition work? How does divining anything work? How does astral connection make you work with aliens and shit? How does
Right.
that work? And the answer is that, well, it's obvious. In the same way that we imprint onto the fabric of space time and the fabric of the Higgs field, we also imprint energetic uh, similarities into the singular consciousness of the universe. And so we, by meditating, by having these physical practices, are able to puncture in through that and come out the other side.
Right.
That's what time travel is. That's how it's possible. That's how you have premonitions of things, because they're different operations, right? Impressions
Right.
are not the same as premonitions in the way that premonitions are always abstract, because you're going into the consciousness, you're tapping into something and you're pulling raw data in with no context.
Yeah.
And then it becomes symbolic because that's the way your brain processes it. But impressions are just snapshots. They're
Right.
just like, it's like, oh, a selfie, there you go, or a video, and then they send it off, and you're like, or you send it off, and you might experience it when you're 6, but you're actually 55.
Yeah.
You might, and that's why it can be non-local, is because you're actually going into the thing where your entire existence has been imprinted already, because there is no past, future, or present.
It's all
There's
real.
only present.
It's an
It's
ever
all one
occurring
thing.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like these questions, it's like if people only thought that hard
Right.
about the question. Like, to me, a guy from a space security, head of security of Space Force in Israel, the fucking weirdest thing, because that question really probably shouldn't have jogged my mind that much. But I was looking for it, right? And for
Yeah.
me, that question was such a phenomenal question. What is space time? What are spaceships? And it's
Right.
like, okay, yeah, what would be faster than light? Well, faster than light would just be piercing the the Higgs field. That's all it would
Right.
be, and then reappearing on the other side, which is exactly probably what the fifth dimension is. Because with that understanding, you realize that we're actually already four-dimensional beings,
Yes.
and
Exactly.
that the only difference between a fourth and fifth dimensional being is the understanding that there is no dimension. And that the fifth dimension is the liberation of self-imposed prisons, of
Yes.
not being connected at all to those prisons. That's what 5D is. That's what this big movement's about. But nobody seems to understand it that way. They're like, no,
Right.
it's a physical thing. We're actually like through another layer. It's like, no. We
Mm.
just, look, we don't have certain hardware. So we can't naturally see dark matter beings. We can't see light beings in the way that we probably could
Right.
if our bodies were built for that. Our bodies aren't built for that. That's why we have meditation, because we have other bodies called astral bodies that are capable of expanding into any known facet of the material world.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So it's like one of those things where you're just like, okay, so all the answers are there.
Yeah.
All you had to do was just
100%.
ask the question and then
100%.
follow it to its root. And it opens up a whole cosmology of answers that you're
Right.
like, okay, cool. Like, so now I know myself. Now I know the universe. Now I know the person next to me. And all
Right.
of a sudden, when somebody is having a hard time, it's a lot easier to be like, I'm not taking this personal.
Right. Exactly. It gives you a real
It does
cosmic
all.
perspective.
Yeah. It makes you one. And the
Right.
thing is like, I've actually been doing, I realized that because through all my childhood, I've had premonitions, empathy, things like that. Sometimes like a telepathy kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
And it was stomped out because Christians believe that shit's the devil, but it's not. It's actually rather normal and
Yeah.
natural. But and actually, your Bible says so. So it's
Right.
just all the Bible says is the intention behind using those skills or
Yeah.
those things is what you need to pay attention to. Not that the things themselves are bad. Cars aren't bad. It's what you do with a car and how you build it that makes it either detrimental to the environment or perfect for the environment.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly. It's
you
all
can
about
say I hate you and mean I love you, and you can say I hate you and mean I hate you.
right,
You know, that's the intention.
right, right. And I think gaining like at a collective level, a more harmonious relationship just with the
Mm,
idea of intention will solve
yeah,
a lot of the issues that
so
we're
many
seeing
things,
today.
so many things.
And I'm gonna say, I don't think we've ever had as good of a definition of what the fifth dimension is, as well as you just explained it. So,
Oh, that's good. Oh, yay,
at
yay.
least
Well,
on the
then I
show.
accomplished part of my goal. There you go. Yeah. So I am winning in a lot of ways, I guess.
Right. No, but it's
Yeah.
funny because it's the fifth dimension. I don't always go into in depth what is the fifth dimension. Like I don't think we don't talk about the idea of the fifth dimension. It's all
Yeah.
like a lot of like
But following all of
representative.
your content, you would say that that's actually, I think anybody would go back and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense,
Well, right, exactly.
because it's
Right.
all about that. It's all
It's
about awareness and all
representative.
about, yeah.
Representative.
Uh, the thing I came to a conclusion of, and I'll wait to see if physics catches up, is that we are 4D beings, and it's weird because they always speak of it as if we're not.
Oh yeah. It's a
They're
limiting
like, yeah,
belief.
it's three spatial dimensions and one time dimension, and it's like, so it's four dimensions, asshole.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're telling me they're two separate things, but what you're saying is they're both dimensions. So why aren't we being told that we are four dimensional creatures already?
Right.
Because we have three spatial dimensions and one time dimension. But when you realize that time itself as a dimension is not a fundamental force and that it is a consequence, you have to wonder, are spatial awarenesses or spatial directions a consequence as well? Are we just seeing dimensions as large scale macrocosm chemical reactions in a way? In the same way that we look down and we go, okay, well, my paper is made up of X amount of atoms in a certain formation.
Right.
Is it really that our spatial dimensions are just holographic impressions of chemical reactions, atomic reactions on a grand scale, a very, very grand scale?
Mm,
Because what's up and down? It's just something that's tall or short. Okay, so there goes our spatial dimension. Our one spatial dimension of up and down is suddenly consequential. What's long and short? It's just something that's long or short. So we have up, down, forward, backward, consequential.
right.
And then you add depth or width or whatever, and you're like, okay, great. So it's consequential. It's just something stretched out, and the thing is that these things are so mind-bogglingly simple, because
Yeah.
you're like, wait, I was taught that in elementary school.
Yeah.
That's how they teach geometry. They literally say drag a triangle around, and that's how you measure things.
Yep.
Great. Trigonometry. Woo. Yay. And it's like, it's just so interesting because it's all these answers are in our face all the time.
Oh yeah.
They're right there. Everything I just said is not something new to you. You already know these things. I just put them in a different perspective, right? So like, it's one of those things where it's like, that is the prison. The prison is that we are so predictive that we excuse the fact that everything is not what we think it is,
Yeah.
right? We have to think about it differently in order to interact with it differently. And I bet you that once you start a physical practice, I do yoga, I've started picking that up again, because I actually sat down and was like, I'm not really interacting with my like spiritual side in the terms of like the power that I could have.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do I get that back? And I was like, oh shit, I was super fit when I used to do a lot of the stuff that I used to do, like a year or two ago.
Mm,
I was constantly working out. I was totally mindful of my body. I stretched all the time. I made a purpose of it every day to do something physically challenging. And also gave me another answer. Your body and your mind are not two separate beings. Your consciousness is going to eventually be separate from your body, but ultimately you are one engine. You
yeah.
are one thing with two different, very helpful potentials that need to learn to balance each other out. I
Right.
realize that I'm body forward, so I react a lot to emotions. But then I also realize, like, okay, all emotions are one emotion.
Right.
It's just how I interpret that emotion.
Right.
They all feel
100%.
the same. It's just this time I said I'm happy. This time I said I'm sad. I can talk to you like this with this amount of energy, and I can be blah, 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 blah. And if the intention is different, I could be screaming at you
Right.
versus being excited about something, and it wouldn't look any different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really about how you interact with that. That was a really important thing that I learned on my own, where I was like, oh, I'm body forward. My body is out of control. And you know what I found? You know what I found is that when I started meditating more often, when I started treating my body as something that needed to be kind of tamed for a second, like an animal, it literally fought me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's literally a wild animal. It is. And the thing is like it's not bad. Like your feelings, your emotions on things are just sensory input. Like
Right.
it's just, oh, it's cold, so put on a jacket so you don't freeze because you are made of liquid and you will freeze and die. If it's hot, get in somewhere cold because your liquid is boiling. You
Right.
know, um, that's a very easy way to look at emotion.
Hmm.
It's when you
Yeah.
go, I hate the cold, it's horrible, and then you're like, why? Because it hurts me, because it makes me uncomfortable and it makes my muscles hurt. It's like, okay, well, why are your muscles hurting? It's because you need to chill the fuck out. No,
Yeah.
no pun intended at all. Like you need to relax because your muscles are telling you that it's cold and it's warning you that it could be beyond healthy limits.
Hmm. Right.
That's all. That's all that's happening. You don't hate the cold. You just your body's telling you to look out.
Right. Giving
And
you the
that's
warning
what
signal.
isn't that what meditation is?
Yeah.
It's like you can't ever stop your thoughts. All you can change is your interaction with them.
Right. Exactly.
Because you realize through meditation, it took me a long time to figure out in this context. You have to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are not the impulses that you have, and that's where the mind comes in, right? Your mind allows you to make those logical assumptions, make those um, to learn those lessons, to make those conclusions, and then grow from them. And that's probably maybe that's what makes humans quote unquote superior to other animals in terms of intellect. But also we have to realize, like with language, we've spoken about language a lot. We've spoken about the way we perceive the world and everything. Like dolphins are just as fucking smart as you.
Yeah.
And they actually have a really, really, really complicated language, and they have hobbies, and they have pets, and they have, families, and they're just water creatures. And actually we're all water creatures because we all live in a liquid.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you there are boundaries we've set for ourselves.
Right.
And
Right.
once you just realize they don't exist, you're like, oh wait, hold on a second. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like that's crazy. I just did 5 years of therapy in 10 seconds because I made a different assumption than I've always made.
Right. Yeah. You're changing the
Yeah.
thoughts, changing the beliefs, and that's what
Yeah.
really it's all about. Um,
Deconditioning.
exactly. Um, so Jamie, we're at about 2.5 hours.
Perfect.
I have a client in about 20 minutes, so I'm going to be needing to
Yeah.
get off the Zoom call in a minute. But
That's
um,
perfectly
this
fair.
has been a fantastic conversation, fantastic podcast. Uh,
I
where
agree.
where can the listeners go and interact with you, find your movie, find the work that you're doing? Is there anywhere you would want to send them?
Yeah. All my stuff that I'm doing for film is on YouTube. It's all free. So I'm not making any money off the short film or anything. It's just a resource. And so that's on mine. It's my name, just Jaime Bennington. It has it's a black circle with a little white dot in it. Um, I can send you a link for that. And then I have my Instagram, which I don't use a lot, but it's good for updates
Cool.
if you're looking for stuff. So, and that's Awesome Frisbees, which I'll also send to you.
Sweet. Yeah, and I can put those in the episode description so people can just kind of click right
Yeah,
there.
exactly. That'd be perfect.
Make it
Yeah.
nice and easy. Awesome, man. All right. So thanks again for coming on.
Yeah.
That's gonna wrap up the show, but we'll have to do it again sometime because I feel like we could have just kept going and
Absolutely.
going and
Yeah. Yeah.
going.
Give me another month and I'll probably have a whole new set of things to talk about.
Solid, solid.
Yeah, but
That's
I love this. This is awesome. Thank you so much for having me, especially on short notice. And
yeah,
I'd be more than happy to do this again.
yeah. This was awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
we like I said, we could have kept going. Like there's
Oh yeah,
unlimited,
yeah. We should keep
unlimited
going.
material. Seriously,
Absolutely. Yeah.
awesome, man. All right, that's gonna wrap up the show. I'll press stop